We're ready, yeah.
Okay, perfect. We'll go ahead and get started, and I'll just introduce myself. So my name's Dan Fuller. I'm the fire chief here for the city, and then we'll go this way. Go ahead, Kendall.
I'm Kendall Frost, the Deputy Chief, Fire Department.
Mandy.
I'm Mandy George. I'm a West Fargo City Commissioner.
I'm Jim Larson. I'm Finance Director for the City of West Fargo.
Good morning. I'm Tina Fisk, City Administrator for the City of West Fargo.
I'm Mark Simmons, West Fargo City Commissioner.
All right.
Great. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate you guys having us. We'll take a moment and just introduce ourselves before we kind of jump in, if that's all right. So you can see first name on there is Todd Mitzel. He wanted to be here today. He got his second COVID shot yesterday, and we were kind of counting on it. And he's texting me at 4 in the morning. He's like, "It's not going to be a good deal if I'm there." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness." So he's here in spirit with us. Unfortunately, I know he'd much rather be here with us right now. But he's principal architect, one of the founding members of ICON. His role is to really be quality control, quality assurance. Everything that goes out company-wide goes across his desk. So it's really nice that we have fresh eyes, looking at things, checking things, making sure that everything meets their standards, or our standards and your standards.
Morning, I'm Steve Goldade. I'm a project architect in the West Fargo office here. Todd and I are communicating constantly, but my role on this particular project would be your project architect, lead for the project, coordinating the team, working with everybody that has to be involved, including yourselves and our team, or who your team is. Mike?
Oh, yes, thank you. So, Mike Clark, I am the Fire Station Specialty Architect with AMC Public Safety Consulting. I want to thank you for making these accommodations. I'm speaking to you from sunny Arizona this morning, where I'm finishing out the punch list on a previous project that I hope to have done in a couple days. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person.
My name is Becky Muller. I'm one of our 3 interior designers out of our West Fargo office for ICON.
And my name is Kyle Cavani, not Todd Mitzel. And so I play a fun part in a lot of different projects that we do, and a lot of it involves community engagement, stakeholder engagement. Sometimes a lot of what we do is public projects, so a lot of it involves gaining public support. Sometimes there's a vote, sometimes there isn't a vote, sometimes it's just building consensus and getting everybody on board. So I joined ICON a little over 6 years ago, and we've just found that it's a missing piece that a lot of architectural firms need, and maybe architects and the average human, let's just say, don't always maybe connect. And my wife is an architect, so I can say this. So I speak architect and I speak human, and I try to join those two together.
And thanks, guys. You'll see on the screen some pictures of support staff. All these support staff, as well as some others, are in the West Fargo office, but these team players would all have some role in your project at some point in time, depending upon what phase we're in. So we have a very good support staff here in West Fargo. They're all experienced in their particular role and could fit into the project very nicely, and have worked on a number of West Fargo projects already. So.
And we'll touch on those in a little bit.
Yep, we'll touch.
I should have said, I'm sorry, the microphone's pretty sensitive.
Oh.
So try to be pretty close to it, otherwise it's not going to pick up for the recording.
Sure.
If you wanted to, we have the other microphones at the things here. If anyone wanted to present from sitting down, either or, it's up to you guys. So, sorry, my apologies. I should.
Yeah, no worries. We can shuffle. I don't think that there's more than a couple of us that'll talk in a moment. But yeah, so just a little bit on ICON. We're fastly approaching our 20th anniversary as a firm. Up to 6 offices now. We've recently expanded to Lincoln, Nebraska. Large team, really excited. Our team in West Fargo has grown tremendously. When I came on at ICON, it was 1.5 employees, and now we're hovering around that 15-20 range. So it's really nice to have this great impact and folks here. And when we started, it's 4 folks. We started in the incubation, like the Center for Innovation at UND. It's kind of an incubation hub, and being that most of our we might have broke off for a second, but being that most of our work is public, it's all about driving value in everything that we do, and that's a firm-wide kind of value that you'll see as we work through things. And for us, it's hoping that you guys are serviced great, you guys like working with us, and that you'd call us back in 10 years. That's really the important thing for us. And then you can see on there too, between AMC and ICON, we've touched a little over 50 fire station projects. Mike, can you see the screen?
There we go. There must be some sort of delay. I felt like you'd moved it, but it took a couple seconds to move on my end. So AMC Consulting is a firm that I created back in 2013. I have a 35-year career in architecture. The first project I did out of school back in the 80s was a fire station. Actually, it was a combined police and fire station, renovating an old building to make it more of a modern police and fire station for a city in Huntington, Indiana. And I enjoyed it so much that I worked for years to get to a point where I could do just that. And I pulled that off in 2013 when I created AMC Public Safety Consulting. We provide services to other architects and to departments around the country where there's an expertise needed in public safety design. We are architects, but we don't try to be an architectural firm working for, say, West Fargo. We want to work for a local architectural firm who knows your city and who can provide you very direct services, and then we provide the expertise on top of that. So, and one last point is that when you see that number of 50 plus 50 plus fire stations, the vast bulk of those are AMCs, and all of those, the 35, 40 of them that are AMCs, are all mine. They aren't part of some firm collective of everybody who's ever worked for the firm and all the stations they've added up. They are my personal experience as well as the firm's experience, so I've touched every single one of those.
Can you guys still see Mike and then also see our presentation? Because
Exactly what you see on the screen.
yeah, it looks like the Zoom disconnected or something.
We can do that.
Okay. All right, yeah. One of the things I just wanted to touch on when we had first connected with Mike is we've worked with a lot of national partners, and it is always this interesting transition where it's like, when is it their model and then when is it our model? And Mike's like, no, we figured this all out. You know, we work with you guys, so rather than it's this thing that's owned over here and then moves, it's that Mike is just part of our team and Mike's sitting and looking over our shoulder. It's a completely different model. Really, we've never done anything like this where he just becomes part of the team rather than doing something and saying, okay, this is when it's like double Dutch. It's trying to get rid of that. So it's really neat. We were really excited when we connected with Mike on that.
Your experience as the owner should be not much different than if I was another architect in Icon's office working on your project.
Thanks, Mike. Today's discussion, I just wanted to briefly touch on a few points, some pictures here of projects, but I wanted to touch on kind of what we want to talk about with you. We want to go through some of our projects, Mike's stuff, highlight that, highlight a few things from Icon, and then actually get into talking specifically about your project and trying to touch on key points that relate to you. So please bear with us as we try to run through some of this front-end stuff just to give you a little background on our team, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
So throughout the presentation, you're going to hear us referencing a number of different projects. In preparation for this and actually in discussing our ability to team and to provide you guys with the services you needed, we went through our lists of projects, and you're going to hear these names for these projects spread throughout the presentation. They all have something to do with your project. Some of them we're going to focus on more than others, but it was interesting to come up with that many projects that we felt had some tie to what it was that you folks are doing. It's not just a handful of projects, but it's a number of different projects matching up with what your project wants. For instance, one of the first one being Moorhead Fire Department response time and station location study. That's kind of my tie to your area. That's where I first heard about your future project, was that for the years of 2019, and then we ran into the COVID issues. We were doing this study for Moorhead Fire Department response time, station location study, and I was spending a great deal of time up in Moorhead doing that. Not a lot of tie to your project specifically, but it was a fascinating study. If you want to know something about how trains affect response times in your community, that was a very educational project. St. Louis Park, I'm hoping that we get to go do some tours tours of some facilities. St. Louis Park Fire Station is down in Minneapolis area, and it is a 30,000 square foot headquarters station. It was a combination department, very much like yours, a 50-50 split of full-time and volunteers. So, and that combination was reflected a lot in how the planning moved forward on that fire station. For instance, they chose on this station to put the living quarters down on the first floor as near to the apparatus bay as they could get it, instead of other alternatives that happen where you end up with the living quarters upstairs, right? And then you got to go down the stairs to get response. And what was fascinating was how the combination department looked at it. We had volunteers as well as full-time on the design committee, and we were developing 2 separate circulation paths for each one of those. And by moving the living quarters down, we got rid of one of those circulation paths, and everything moved more smoothly. But it's a great example of how to combine all the parts and pieces you need to make a station, and then doing it with the staff in order to get a good design answer in the end. Woodbury is another one that, in talking with the chief early in the project and reading through your RFP, Woodbury really came to mind as a project that it would be great if we could all go over and see. Otherwise, I can show you examples of how that project came together. What is interesting is it's a 30,000 square foot building, but it ties together both a police and a fire department. And if you look at the plan on the next slide, thank you, you can see how that blue area in the middle, that's the main piece of this. On the right side of your screen, hope I'm saying this right, is the fire department. On the left is the police department, and this training component was set in the middle as the tie between those 2 departments when they became a public safety department. It has a very large training room that can be divided in half with 50 on each side. It's got a SimMan training area for the EMS for training the medical personnel, the EMS and paramedics. So there'll be an ability for a trainer or supervisor to sit in one room and watch what's going on in the other room and affect some of the outcomes of the treatments. There's breakout spaces. There's you can see the photo of the kitchen area that actually serves as either the kitchen for the fire department, the break area for the police department, but also as a serving kitchen for this big meeting room. And then right across the hall from that is a big outdoor patio for the firefighters and others to enjoy the outdoors and get some sunlight into the spaces. That was an exciting project that I'd love to be able to show you. Bloomington number 3 has a great example. This one was just completed last year, and it has the best example of how to do a hot zone, cold zone process with a decontamination process that connects the 2. And I'd like to show you that if we ever get the opportunity to go tour these, because it shows how that process flows and how it I don't know, forces is the wrong word, but it encourages the department staff to follow all the rules as they pass through the steps you have to go through to get from the apparatus bay back to the administrative quarters or living quarters. So 3 30,000 square foot facilities that kind of meet the same kind of needs as what you are, and they're all within range of being able to go and take tours of them. You also talk at length about needing a training tower. You're trying to improve your ISO ratings by getting the right kinds of training into that. We have plenty of experience doing training towers, and what I want to point out about those is that it's easy to take a hose tower, right, and add a few elements to it and be able to do the FTC connections, to have multiple levels, do ladder drills, hose drills, do your confined space repelling. That's all easy to do. What the added value to doing these right is to put in wider landings so that you can have training personnel watching what's going on, so that you don't have to worry about your firefighters stumbling downstairs because there isn't room for 2 or 3 people at a time to be there. Multiple viewing angles, so again, you can see what people are doing and you can correct bad actions before they become a problem. But ventilating, lighting, safety anchors, there's a whole lot of added value that having done a great number of these, we bring to your project?
And McKenzie County Public Works is not directly relatable. It has a lot of common features, but one of the things we wanted to touch on was, we started working for McKenzie County 10 years ago with their new courthouse, then built a jail for them, then built the public works for them, then we redid the courthouse because they've grown, and then now we're doing a fairgrounds for them. So we're really proud of this project specifically, but we're also really proud of the fact that 10 years later they're still calling us back, we're still working with them, and it's taking care of them, and there's some neat things about this project that Becky wanted to touch on.
Yeah, from an interior design aspect, we had to take a lot of different departments and merge them into one and figure out how the spaces adjacent to one another work for everybody that is using this building, and having a very nice contemporary lobby with materials that are effective and efficient to clean, especially with people coming in from the shop and then also people coming in from the street, being able to easily maintain those spaces, as well as meeting with all the different user groups multiple times and holding interviews and figuring out what works for who and how to merge that all into one project. Like one of the things, we're having all centralized meeting spaces, conference rooms, training areas, so that people coming out from the street and people that work there every day can utilize the spaces and reserve them, and how that functions for them, as well as using a very clean and neutral color palette so that it doesn't lean one way or the other for which department. And another one thing that we had to work really diligently on is how they moved from one space to another, how to reconfigure their furniture into their existing space, and then also when we were hired to redo the courthouse, how to reconfigure their old space for their new departments that were going into the courthouse. So there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of communication that really needed to take place to make this a more efficient project.
Thanks, Becky. So now we're going to talk through a little bit about how we want to work through this project with you guys and some of our thoughts, and you're going to see Mike's depth of knowledge, and I'm hoping it blows you away like it did for us. It's quite a bit.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Mike. And as you can see, we're trying to integrate some projects that Mike has worked on, a few of ours, and try to show the fact that as a team, we bring all aspects of integration of buildings and the expertise required for your particular project together as a team. And so we looked through your RFP you put out and tried to look at the points you had in there and check the boxes and go through it. So what we'd like to do is try to take a few minutes now, briefly go through some of those points, try to hit on key ones we focused on as a team that we thought were important to your project.
And I would like to say that if there's something specific in that list that somebody at the interview panel there would like to talk in more detail, we can answer questions on all of those different elements, but we picked a few that are primary, that we thought were best to talk to you about, and we're going to walk through some of those. The first one being the cancer mitigation issues within fire departments. I'm assuming you've all heard about this because we're the third team, but the idea of a hot zone and a cold zone design that keeps contaminants that come back from fires in the apparatus bay and don't spread it throughout the sleeping quarters and administrative areas of the fire station. And the point I want to make about that is that it's not as simple as just drawing a line through the building and saying everything on this side of that line is going to be in the hot zone and everything on the other side is going to be cold zone. There's all these processes, and you're going to hear me say this a lot, processes. I like to think that at AMC what we talk about a lot is a process-driven design strategy. We want to find out what your processes are and then design those into the building so that it works the way you work. This is an example of working with one department to set up the processes that get them from the hot zone to the cold zone. So you can move through the turnout gear, you can go through the gear cleaning process, you can go from there to the personnel decontamination process. That leads to a spot where there's some laundry so you can wash the staff uniforms and things that were under their turnout gear. And you can do that separately from the facilities laundries before you ever get to the cold zone, right? We do have a way you can short circuit that, but we've always got hand washing stations where you move from those places to others. And then just as a side note, one of the interesting things that in my practice where I work all across the country is I see all kinds of different ways to do this. And for instance, on the West Coast, they put a lot of airlocks, kind of like your weather vestibules on the front of buildings. They'll put airlocks between any of these spaces and between any of the hot zone spaces and the cold zone spaces. It's another way to do it, and it's something that we really look forward to working with you to figure out what are the strategies that work best for you. Do you need one of those vestibules with a boot wash and a hand wash station, or is that just going to end up being wasted space because your guys are never going to stop and do it? We have to work that through and decide what is the best process for you that meets how your guys are going to do work. So, like I said, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do this. I just kind of covered this slide, by the way, but we've done this a bunch of different ways, and we will talk that through with you, just like we will other every single department in the building, right? So we've got the decon zone. There's going to be an admin zone, and with admin, we have to do a lot of coordinating, by the way, with Becky at the interior design side to make sure that the spaces we're designing work for the kinds of furniture you're going to need, that we've got the power and the data drops, all that set up right. Also about admin stuff, he moved on to living quarters, but we also have to make sure that security works in the building, that the public can get in, the public can go to the community space or the large training room if that's the way it's set up, and still get out without violating the security of the building. That's all fun stuff to work through and figure out. You're seeing living quarters up there now. I know one of your questions, one of the points you brought up in the RFP was designing for gender-neutral spaces so that you have individual sleeping rooms. Generally, that is individual sleeping rooms. It's usually one gender-neutral toilet shower space per 2 bedrooms, kind of like your household arrangements at home. That way, somebody can get up, they can go into a bathroom, lock the door, and it's theirs. Doesn't matter if it's male or female, and then when they leave, then they leave it unoccupied. Some other things about living quarters that's some of the new trends is putting lockers between the sleeping area and the hallway, where the person who's off duty can come in and get things out of their lockers. Let's say they forgot their cell phone or their cell phone charger in their locker. They can get in and get it without disturbing whoever's using that room on the second or third shift. So trends in design, I'm going to keep pushing on this. I already covered this a little bit, so we'll be short here. But like I said, it is all process-driven design solutions. I talked earlier about how St. Louis Park had a combination department. We're going to look at all that stuff as we design the building, and we can even sit and talk with you about how it is you maneuver around the building when you do what you do inside the building. That little diagram you see down to the left was a diagram of how an infrared sauna to do a perspiration process as part of the decon process, how that would fit into what they were doing with their showers and things. And it was an interesting look at the fact that it added like 11 steps to the return from a fire to put that infrared sauna where we did. And then we didn't actually do that step. We did a different step that cut those steps in half and put in a steam shower, so that you could get done in, far fewer steps. It made it more likely that people were going to actually do the process the way it was intended and not skip over some of the parts because you had to walk back and forth to the locker room 3 times. But that's the kind of level of detail we'll bring to every part of the conversation with you to make sure that we're setting this building up to work the way you want to use it every single day.
Sorry, before we left that, I didn't hear Mike mention, I know he has been working a long time with design solutions in the decontamination process and working with different fire departments. And I know, Mike, over the course you've received national recognition and awards for those solutions and how you work closely with fire departments to get through that. So I didn't want to miss that.
Yes,
one of the big
the
steps
St. Louis
in the
Park Fire
process.
Station won a gold medal award from the Station Style Awards. And as long as I'm talking and I can toot my own horn for a minute, I have been published and I have spoken at national and local conventions on all of these subjects.
Yeah, we're really fortunate, ICON being that we have experience in fire stations, and we're in West Fargo. We kind of had our choice of who we wanted our consultant and who we wanted to bring this extra level of depth, and Mike really stood out, and yeah, it's really neat what he's done. So we're going to talk a little bit more about our specific process. So we talked about kind of some of the things we've done, some of the things we're considering. We'll talk a little bit more about the process, and then maybe hit at a couple points of additional qualifications before we wrap up. You see the new slide, Mike?
Ah,
There you go.
sorry, my view is a little cut off here. So, so we look at this as being an integrated design team. I said earlier that from your perspective, I should just appear to be another architect in ICON's offices. You're not going to see us sitting at the table with, you know, one group of designers on one side of the table and another group of the designers on the other side of the table and not understanding who is doing what. We consider ourselves to be one team providing you with this information. So I'm also covering this slide because the projects that we're talking about are AMC projects, but we worked together to come up with this slide. But we want to start our approach by the facility tours. I keep bringing those up, that there's, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but visiting, man, that's worth 1,000,000 words to go see these projects. And they're not that far away, and they ticked off a lot of the major issues that you guys had in the RFP. So we would really like to start our approach with facility tours and take a day to go down to Minneapolis and see the 3 projects that I've talked about and the elements that are within them, so we can look at how a really good training academy can get set up. We can look at how admin and training and how those relationships work in a multi-story building. And we can look at Bloomington's decon process so you can understand more about what I'm saying instead of just looking at pretty pictures. And then if you've got some favorites that you've done or that you've toured getting ready for this project, we'd love to go see those too. It really helps the process along if we all have the right images in our head.
One thing when it, oh, sorry, Mike, you can continue.
All right. So we have AMC will be in charge of the programming, and we have a very comprehensive programming process. We've divided up the fire department into a bunch of operational units. We like to think about it as talking to you about how you operate. We're not just asking you how big do you want the chief's office to be. We're talking to you about how do we want the chief to interact with the rest of the department. And from there, we build how much space you need through an interactive discussion that should take, you know, a day for us to work through how all of those elements come together, not only in each department, but how they interact with each other. So that will determine the size of the building. We also wanted to talk a little bit about listening and sharing. Like I said earlier, AMC gets to travel. We get to see a lot of stations. We have designed, as we said earlier, 35 or 40 stations, but in that time we've also toured hundreds of stations. So we have seen a multitude of different ways that this gets done. We've seen multitudes of data about why we're doing things the way we are. For instance, if you need to support back to your community the idea of the line of duty death issue related to cancer, we have that information, and we can show up as a disconnected source for you to be able to say, yes, they really need some of these things because this is truly an issue. We can provide you with that, and not just educating, you know, your department and your people during the design, but educating elected officials if that is necessary, and educating the public as well.
And one thing I just want to touch on before we switch to the next slide is how, you know, when it comes to listening and sharing and educating, we are extremely lucky to have Kyle on our team for the community engagement that he's able to bring to every type of project, whether it's an elementary school or sports arena or anything like that. He is really important to our team and how he's able to kind of share his excitement about a project, and it's really contagious. And you know, he has a mindset of, you know, like he mentioned, a normal human, an architect, but then also like you guys, he sits on the City Council for Grand Forks, so he kind of knows both sides of the world, and we're really lucky to have that perspective in our team as well.
Thanks, Becky. Yeah, appreciate that. And to talk a little bit about that, when you look at what we do, whether it's a school, whether it's an arena, the way we communicate with the public and the way they communicate with you guys, and then the way we communicate with maybe even department heads is different, right? And so how we structure that and how we compose that is important to us. That's a big part of what I do. And then at the same level is, you know, being that this is an open process, almost everything that we do in the public world has to be an open process. So we have to broadcast that. We have to make sure that everything is transparent and available for the public to understand. With that, we've done public, we've done project blogs, we've done different presentations, we've done virtual animations, we've done the 3D VR walkthroughs so people can place themselves and they can pull up their iPhone, they can go to the link, and then they can look around at the room. And it's really easy for people to visualize that as opposed to looking at a plan that these guys get that maybe the average person doesn't really understand. At the end of the day, the goal is that we get consensus, we get confidence, we get approval. We don't want pitchforks coming after us or you, frankly, right? So we want to do this the right way and keep everybody happy. And one example is working on a transportation building in Crookston. They had sought public approval. It didn't get approved. At the end of the day, we were brought in and kind of evaluated where they were and said, let's kind of start over and let's look at this as an owner-derived solution rather than an architect-derived solution or even a public-derived solution. Rather than something that we're prescribing, it's more of something that we're coming up through together. And what was neat was that we had farmers, we had business owners, we had all kinds of different people sitting around the table, and everyone, if you see these options considered, everyone's like, well, I can do a pole barn for this, or I can do, you know, a metal building for this, or what about a pre-engineered metal building? Let's just call Morton, they'll take care of it. And they don't have the requirements that you guys have as a public entity, right? ADA, life safety, all these things that you have to consider. So we walked through and showed folks, this is why it costs as much as it does. At the end of the day, they didn't pick the least expensive option, and we got over 75% approval whenever we brought it to the public. So it's not always about doing the least expensive thing. It's about explaining what you're doing and providing the evidence so that you guys are making smart decisions in the public's eye.
And before we move off of that slide, or well, as we move off of that slide, I would like to add that one of the intriguing things that I found about ICON is this this idea of being able to work with multiple groups, multiple ideas, and pull them all together to get a cohesive answer out of that group of people. We have that same issue with the fire department, I'm assuming. We haven't talked in detail about how you operate, but as a combination department, you're going to have a chief, you're going to have officers who are involved, you're going to have a training officer, you're going to have a public education officer, and you're going to have volunteers, and you're going to have different shifts. And getting all of those people together, whether it's multiple meetings, whether it's providing documentation that gets back to those folks, whether it's meetings at the end of each phase, but being able to come back to that entire group every time and show that we're hearing and we're listening and we're understanding their issues as we move forward with the design is a great thing.
Yeah, I just wrap that up and I'll say it humbly. My years of experience with Kyle have changed the way I look at projects as architects get in their box and they're doing their thing, but Kyle just sort of pulls us out of that and mixes us with the team and everybody. And it's a unique understanding of a project that many architects can't get, and it sort of happens in our teams. So
I'm going to just come here more often. This has been enjoyable for me.
All right, so kind of a change away from the we all love Kyle subject here, but
this is very organic. I hope you guys realize that part.
And getting back to our fire station stuff. So this slide is titled that success is in the details, and it really is. There are several different zones within the fire department as far as these details go, right? We have to be able to do the professional utilitarian, you have to be able to do the utilitarian apparatus bay, get all the finishes right in there, get all of the elements coordinated throughout the apparatus bay, the water drops, the air drops, the heating elements, the exhaust elements, all of that has to come together, and it has to be done well. But it has to be done at a different level of finish from, say, the offices, where we're going to have a professional look and where Becky is going to be a big part of making sure that the furniture all works, and like we said earlier, power drops and other things that are all set up right so that so you get a professional environment there. And then you've got the living quarters where you need more of a home atmosphere, right? And we're specifying things that might be things like recliners or entertainment centers and things. That's one of the things that I really liked in talking with Becky is that she has a wide variety of experience, and she can turn to the next slide and take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. A part of our interior design team that I don't find in very many other places is how we're involved from day one, say this interview, to the end of construction and even beyond to make sure it's functioning properly. But some of the things we work on most are the programming and space planning directly with the architect and the users, from casework and materials, having a presentation, make sure everything is, you know exactly what you're getting. Same with lighting and acoustics. We kind of dig deep and work with all the professionals needed to make sure everything is as efficient as possible in those areas, down to whatever type of artwork you guys want on the wall, if that's something that you're interested in. We're kind of the whole gambit with our team, which is really exciting and fun. A few images that you can see up there is how we've utilized different community living spaces and how to make them efficient for big groups of people or less quantity, making it the right size and right efficiency for everyone. The bottom picture is from a building where they wanted the largest serving space and community gathering place possible with indoor and outdoor access. You can see the door in the back out to the private patio. And then what you can't see in this picture is a large serving kitchen where they do have more commercial grade appliances, large counters for potlucks and things like that. It's a really community driven area that we really think would be efficient in your project as well.
Yes, I can talk about this one, West Fargo. Our office is here. We've worked on a lot of projects here. We have team members that live in West Fargo, have kids in West Fargo, so obviously if the fire department's called, it's important to us, but more importantly is our staff and the people here have a connection with West Fargo. When the project would be done, we would have to face you as well as the local people face to face over time. So we want to make sure it's a successful thing, and so that's the way we treat every project we deal with in West Fargo, is that personal commitment and connection, because we're here. That's where we're at. Cost estimating, I almost forgot. We just opened bids on West Fargo projects for the Parks Department, and we're really proud of our cost estimating that we do in our office. That was a $3 million project, and we were less than 1% off with the estimating. So they were able to get everything they wanted because we estimated correctly, put it together for them, and they got it, but they fit in their budget. So it was a great project, and we're proud of the fact of how we work closely with suppliers and all the different team members and get everything fit in there. So you don't leave anything on the table or you're wondering where you're going to come up with the extra money. So. Oh, commitment there. Our office is, obviously we said, located in West Fargo there. This highlights some of our projects that we work on in West Fargo, the commitment we have. We've been very fortunate working right downtown West Fargo, the lights out in West Fargo and on Cheyenne, and then like I said, most importantly, the West Fargo Park District building, they just broke ground on, they're just setting up. So you'll see that work happening out on 32nd Rendezvous Park through the summer here. So,
as you can see, we do have a structural engineer in-house here in West Fargo, but we work with everybody from every type of mechanical, civil, electrical, structural engineer. We have really good working relationships with all of them, and we're kind of open to, sometimes our clients have a personal relationship with one that they'd like us to use, and we're more than happy to do that. One thing with our consultants that we really like to utilize is the Building Information Model, or BIM, that we use. It's all 3D technology that really allows us to build the building before it's built, which is really important for clash detection and even just creating different types of views and outlooks that you might not see every day, but also allows us to explain it to you guys a little bit more visually as well. And also it helps us create the pretty pictures that we want to show the community to really get the materials across and what it's going to look like. You can kind of see here the left side are renderings and the right side are the actual built ones. And we get very close. We don't like to create a pretty picture and then not deliver. It's, what we design is what we get, and that's how we like to like to do on every single project. Green design, this is something that ICON practices on every project, but not necessarily to the certification level. If it is something that's important to our client, we have different LEED certified people in our offices that we really like to pull in to make sure they have a say and they have an outlook on things that we might be able to do that will help the process a little bit better.
Construction methods. I'll just touch briefly on it. There's various ways to approach your project, and we always like to talk to the team as we're starting the project of what makes sense. You know, there's design, bid, build, there's the construction manager at risk, and there's a construction manager as an advisor. They all have pros and cons and could fit projects differently, but we just want to let you know that we're experienced in all of those avenues and would really look forward to working with the team to make a decision on which is the best way to proceed with your project.
As we wrap up, just quickly, just like we touched on before, repeat referral clients, we are over 80%. It's really important to us that we take care of you guys and that you guys don't go and tell every other town, you know, this is what ICON did and they didn't take care of us or they missed the bar. It's really, really important. So you'll see just as long, also with AMC, it's a huge part of our business. So we look forward to not only being able to help you now, but, you know, in the years to come. And we've got some letters of recommendation. I think we put those in our proposal. We also have a ton of references and we can provide more if you'd like. I'm happy to, you know, have you guys call any of these folks throughout the state.
So I'm going to jump in really quick on this slide. We wanted to get this in at the end because it's so important. We saw these words in your RFP, evidence of innovation, and we're fascinated by that because it's kind of built into our process. The way we work, that whole process-driven design, that is us sharing with you the concepts about how these processes should work to do their best for you. And then we work that with you to get it to the right answer that is for you. These are all customized buildings, and every single one of them is full of some sort of innovation. At AMC, we're working across the country. We're working with departments from East Coast to West Coast, and we see all kinds of different ways that these things are done, and we bring that all to the table, and we work with you to find the right solution for you. So that innovation that you're looking for, like I said, is built into the process of finding out how you work and then making sure we design the building to work with that.
And just in closing, just why ICON and AMC, we're really proud to have Mike as our team member. Being someone that works nationally and just focuses on public safety is huge to us. We've done fire stations before, but the scale that you guys are doing is not something that's done very often in North Dakota. And why take a chance? Why not bring somebody in and make sure it's done absolutely perfect? We want to do that and leverage our local folks in West Fargo. It took us 8 minutes to get here today. It takes me a little bit longer, but these guys and the rest of the team are right down the street, and we think that it's really important to have those folks at your beck and call, really close by. We have structural in-house, which we found, you know, we're open to it if you don't want us to work with our in-house structural, but there's just a lot of dynamics as we go through the design that it's really good to have someone just literally the next office over from Becky. And then as we talk about transparency, that's really important to us. We'll make sure that you aren't left in a lurch where you don't have the answer to the question or your public saying, why did you do this? And then last, or second to last, the multi-pronged management approach. The way that we talk to folks, as we said before, is very different. So we expect to address you guys completely different than we would the public, and we understand that, and that's something that we'd like to leverage. And then lastly, especially with volunteers, having flexibility with your scheduling. For us, a lot of our public meetings are at 8 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night. That's very typical, and again, we're right down the street. We understand that. We know that we're going to have to work through folks, especially with a mix of volunteer and paid staff. And that's it. And 24 seconds early.
All right. Well, thank you for that presentation. That was, I love the idea of the transparency. That's a huge thing with why we've gotten to this point, is making sure that we're transparent with the public and transparent with our elected officials, and even when the hard conversations come up, we have them. So that's really appreciated on this side of the table. Just a couple of questions. The first one that comes to my mind, how many projects have you guys and AMC actually worked together on? Or would this be the first fire station project you guys have collaborated on?
Yeah, I could answer that one. This would be the first collaboration with AMC. Obviously, for a very important reason is a project of this complexity and what it is requires a very specialized person. And we looked around it before we settled on Mike and his company. Similar to what we've done with other projects, we make sure that the team we select is the absolute best for the project. And in this case, we thought Mike was that selection, and we haven't approached a fire hall project of this complexity in North Dakota before, so that's why it would be our first one with Mike.
Yeah.
And our first jail, we designed with HDR, which is a large national firm, and nobody's escaped yet. So
There you go.
so far, we are able to work with national partners, and Mike specifically, the way that he proposes to work together, that's what really set him apart, is that it's not a double Dutch situation, it's just Mike becomes part of the team.
Yep. Yeah, and then having AMC involved, there's stations that we've been in that he's designed. Like, we didn't know that at the time, but now they're looking back at some of the places we've been as a fire department and our leadership staff, we've been in those buildings and pointed out things, features from those buildings, not knowing that was his work. So that is good, Mike.
It's good to hear. Thank you. But for what it's worth, that is what I do. You asked, have we ever teamed before? Together, no, but it is all AMC does. We team with other architects. We do not want to be the architect in charge. We want to provide the expertise. So we've got a lot of experience working with a lot of different groups and in a lot of different arrangements, and haven't had any issues yet.
In terms of a fee schedule, and we're not asking for anything specific today, generally speaking, what do you charge in terms of fees? Does it go off a flat fee or a total project cost, 6-7% of the total project? I mean, how have you operated in the past with a partnership like this?
How much would you like to pay? No.
No,
Don't ask Jim that, yeah.
We have work projects percentage, we work project flat fee, we work projects as cost plus. We would negotiate that with the team, and again, for the fee that would fit the best for what your team is looking to do. If you want to expand?
Yeah, and it just really depends on what components. Do you want civil to be part of our contract? Do you want M&E to be part under us, or do you want it to be contracted separately? Mike's services are not an add-on. You don't pay extra. He's part of what we do. He takes off a big chunk of the workload when it comes to programming and all of those things. So you're not paying extra for him. We've had fees as low as 4% and fees that are 9, 8%. It just depends on what the size is. If it's a $1 million project versus a $10 million project, obviously it scales different. So if we're thinking generally a $10 million project and you're thinking all services except for maybe civil, which is something that we would actually recommend that civil contract directly with you, is it 5.5 to 8.5%? It just depends, right, on where you're at and how complex it is. I can say that we've never lost a job because we charge too much. So we like to think that we bring value, and we'll talk through it and say these are the things that you want. If you look at the AIA contract that we'd recommend, Section 12 has all of the different items that are included, owner provided, extra services. We go through each one and make sure that everybody's on the same page and don't upset somebody. So we would love to work with you guys, and we'd love to work with you guys based on qualifications. We'll get to the price. And you could call it references. We don't overcharge, but we do think we provide a great service.
Good value. Yep.
And for what it's worth, AMC was set up for just that question. We don't want to provide an entire second architectural firm with all the overhead that a firm has to a project. We want to provide only the expertise you need and let the architects who are in your area provide all of the overhead that is necessary, the meetings, the spaces, all of that. They take care of that, and we're just experts. You're not paying for two architectural firms.
Good. Yeah, that was basically the crux of my question, was whether or not that would happen. So, yeah. In meeting with some of the possible CM candidates in the area that they've been calling and asking about, timelines and stuff like that, common theme I've heard is availability of resources, availability of construction materials, and just outrageous lead times on some certain products. Have you, with all the experience you have in West Fargo, Steve, have you run into any of that, or And if you have, how you fix, or how you're going to deal with that?
The last 6 months, yes.
Yeah.
You run into it in some materials. It's a challenge in construction right now, and it's part of the being open about what you pick and what systems you'll pick in the design, tying in with our structural engineer a lot, because that system can dictate the direction you take. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. We've been bidding, obviously, a lot of projects over the last months, and both here and in other parts of North Dakota, and have pretty good idea of which disciplines or areas are experience the biggest problem with materials.
We had a really interesting exercise where we bid 2 almost identical elementary schools 3 months apart. And there was quite a difference, right? One's breaking ground actually today. The second one's breaking ground today, and the last one broke ground a few months ago, right before the thaw, or the freeze. And it's definitely a little crazy, but at the same point, all of our folks that we're talking to, all those same CMs, are saying this is your lead time because you're bottlenecked in steel, or you're bottlenecked in, Amazon's doing all these things here specifically, that's affecting the national market. They think there's a plateau, and that potentially 9 months down the road, hopefully we'll be in a better situation, is what I've heard when we've talked to a few folks. The bidding has not been out of control, but we definitely would say, we've got quite a process to go through, so you're not bidding tomorrow, thank goodness. But if something happened, you have to have strategies, whether it's design alternates when we go out to bid. Another key thing that we have is we do have a construction team that's in-house. They don't work on anything public. They only work on private things. They do a lot of stuff across the country. But what's really neat is there's 2 folks that all they do is estimating. And so we can go and we can ping them. And they do sit right by me. And so that's something where I can go and say, hey, what are you thinking of this? And we have done that specifically with the Bismarck schools because we noticed that the first elementary was pretty much right on. And we were really nervous about that, being that we knew what was coming. And there was some escalation. Everyone was prepared for that. So at the end of the day, we still moved forward with the second one. But it was not, obviously it was not a situation where we designed something. It was unfortunate that everything's kind of coming to a head.
Yep. Okay. Any questions from anyone else on the panel?
Okay, this is a quick one. Construction method are you using for the Park District project?
Are you,
What
design
method
bid
of
build.
delivery?
Design bid build.
Okay.
Yep, they bid that publicly. We did 3 primes, general, mechanical, electrical. And so then it's a typical design bid build.
And what's your % on that fee?
It was a great number. We negotiated a great number with them. It was less than 5%.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And that was a project too where we had just done that Crookston project that was very similar. So we had lots of relevant experience, and obviously we're very aggressive, but we did negotiate. They negotiated us, I should say.
Yeah.
They blamed it all on you.
Yeah.
They do have a team member that I did train there.
Yeah, well, I wish I could say thank you, but we can't.
All right. Anything else? Last thing, could we get a copy of your PowerPoint?
Absolutely.
Well, and that's it. Yeah. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for being available, Mike. I know you had to push some things around, so we appreciate it.
Oh, you're getting out of me installing some flagstones, so I'm happy for that.
Yeah. There you go. Yep.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you all.
Would you like me just to email it to you or thumb drive it?
Email.
Okay, perfect.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think we'll just trade back and forth. I think that works, huh?
Okay. All right, we can go ahead and get going. First thing we'll do is introductions, since you guys don't know us, and we've all spoken briefly on the phone. So my name's Dan Fuller. I'm the fire chief here for the city of West Fargo, and we can start at the end with introductions.
I'm Mandy George. I'm a West Fargo City Commissioner, and the fire department is my secondary portfolio.
Good morning, I'm Jim Larson, I'm finance director for the city.
Good morning, I'm Tina Fisk. I'm city administrator for the city of West Fargo.
Hi, I'm Mark Simmons, West Fargo City Commissioner.
Hi, I'm Kendall Frost, Deputy Chief, Fire Department. Perfect. Great. We'll go through personal introductions here in a little bit, but first of all, I just want to say, I appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk to you. We're really excited, both from Five Bugles and Wendell, and then our teaming partner, Stroh. Really excited to present to you today and what we can do for you and ultimately, on this facility. Personal introductions. I'm Robbie Krzyzanowski. I'm the Director of Emergency Services for Wendell and Five Bugles Design. I've been doing fire stations now for 12 years with Five Bugles Design. We formed this niche service, but even before that, for 6 years, I was also doing fire station design. So I've got about 18 to 20 years of experience in this. At to the point now to where this is all I do for a living is emergency services facilities. It's got to be a pretty neat little niche for myself, and I get to say I get to design fire stations and police stations. It's pretty cool type of thing. Again, all I do, and since Five Bugles Design's inception for the last 12 years, Steve Gosman, I'll talk a little bit about him in a little bit here, but basically formulated this design group and this niche service, and I took over the role from him 2 or 3 years ago as the director of Five Bugles Design. And Steve still is on with our firm, but he's in a lesser role, you could say, heading off into the sunset. But as far as myself goes, and Laura and Jim, that's all we do from day one, and everything we do is fire station emergency services. I'm going to turn it over to Laura to let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Laura Eisnagel. I'm an architectural and interior designer with Wendell and Five Bugles Design. As Robbie mentioned, all I do is emergency services, so fire, EMS, police. I feel so lucky every day that I get to do it because it's just one of the best markets I've ever been able to work in. So I joined the team about 2 years ago. It was a very strategic move for me to come over to join it because, again, this is one of my favorite things to design. So thanks for having us here today. Jim?
My name is Jim Schmidt. I'm a Senior Emergency Services Specialist with Five Bugles Design. I have over 40 years of continued service in the fire and emergency medical services. I'm also a fire service instructor specializing in hazmat and special ops. I'm also state rep for the state of Wisconsin. I've been on the owner's side, on your side of the table, if you will, for 3 fire station projects, including Wisconsin's first Gold LEED certified fire station and also a regional training center. So quite a bit of experience on your side of the table. I've known the folks from Five Bugles Design, the founders, for the past 10 years. And in the past 5 years as a Senior Emergency Services Specialist with the group, I've had the opportunity to lead the programming for and assist in the design of approximately 50 fire stations. And honestly, I'm one of the new members of the team, so I'm also very happy to continue serving one community at a time, from the East Coast to Alaska and many states in between. So that's who I am.
Hi, I'm Terry Stroh with Teal Stroh Architects. Our firm just turned 30 years old this year. We're primarily commercial architects, and we've had the pleasure to work with Five Bugles on several other projects, and so our design philosophies and even our culture and our offices are very similar, so we're like super excited about this.
I'm Devin Mock. I'm a project architect with TL Stroh Architects. I've been with Terry for 25 years. So I was 10 when I started with it. But I'm involved in the design process and construction administration throughout the project, so we're glad to be here. Yeah, just kind of going through some of the other staff on our end. Jim Wendy and John Rowan, our mechanical, electrical, plumbing services are all in-house. So we have those services available to us. NCE, they do every fire station that we do on the structural side of things. So a very good relationship there, working with that sub-consultant. They're excellent at what they do.
KLJ, I don't know, Terry, if you want to say a few words about them.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you guys have ever worked with KLJ. They're a large firm all over the country, actually. Scott is somebody I've actually involved in 3 projects with him right now, so we know them really well, and they're good guys.
So just kind of again going through Five Bugles and Wendell Companies. So Five Bugles Design, about 3 or 4 years ago, we were purchased by a large architecture engineering firm called Wendell Companies, based on the East Coast out of New York. We do have an office in Minneapolis and Eau Claire. I'm based out of Eau Claire, but really what that allowed us to do beforehand, when we were Five Bugles Design and an architectural design group, we had a small firm of about 10 to 12 of us that basically did this. But now, since our purchase with Wendell, it gave us a lot more horsepower and a lot more services that we can offer. And as you can see on the next slide, all those services on the left are everything that we do. So we have a lot of different niche services that we can offer, public safety being the Five Bugles brand, but we do have 15 offices and over 275 employees. We are an employee-owned company, myself being one of those employee-owned entities, and we have owners in Minneapolis and Eau Claire as well. Again, the Five Bugles Design and our niche service. So again, we focus ourselves a lot on that national expertise. When we do a lot of these, and we'll talk about this as we move forward throughout this, but that one there, 200 public safety projects, we learn something new on every one of these, good or bad, right? So that's kind of what we bring to the table is, what did we learn on the last one? What worked, what didn't work. We'll get a little bit into the next portion of our presentation where we talk about small things make a good station a great station. 25 public safety facilities in the last 5 years, and another 20 studied. That's 25 that we've constructed. In-house public safety specialists like Jim Schmidt. We have fire chiefs that work for us. We also have police chiefs that work for us that have gone through this process before. They'll lead through the programming efforts with our input, be involved throughout the project, just, for you to bounce questions off of. If you have any other questions, and even after today, if you have questions, feel free to call Jim and he can, answer anything that you have. Public safety projects ranging anywhere from 10 to 60,000 square feet. And again, that national credibility, judging, writing, speaking, there's 3 of us right now, myself, Jim, and Steve, that have all wrote articles or have been judges for Station Style Awards and Firehouse Magazine. So going to those large events where we're judging those types of things, again, you're learning those small things from other parts of the country that, we can bring back to the Midwest to put into these facilities.
So you might know us a little bit, being we're in close community. Tealstra Architects, we do primarily commercial architecture. We've again done a couple of projects with Five Bugles. One is the Osgood Fire Station, which was one of their newer buildings. Recognize the NDSU School of Business downtown. We actually designed and construction managed that, so we're familiar with your construction management type of arrangement that you're looking at. The Shack, which is NDSU's big sports facility. So we're used to doing complicated and big jobs, and I think the other thing that helps with us is that it just we understand how to build in this area, and we really have a good handle on contractors and even materials that are available in this area that might not be in others.
So understanding the project, obviously this is taken out of the RFP. So design and construct a new headquarters facility, unique to fire stations and the services that you obviously provide. The scope of work that we're offering is the design, the site design, any construction administration, and just, the construction delivery method of construction management agency. I applaud you for going that way. That is a very, very, very nice way to deliver a project. We also, as Terry mentioned, they were dabbling in construction management, but we also as a firm offer construction management services. So doing that method, it's about 90 to 95% of our projects get delivered in that capacity, and it's really great to get that construction manager on board right away during design.
again, I commend you for going that route, but all of our projects, like I said, not all of them, but 95% of them are delivered in that delivery method. So project approach, in our proposal, we kind of broke this out into two different phases. Phase one being the planning phase. We're going to go through each one of these. I'm just going to briefly go through them on this page, but project tours are a big thing for us. There's nothing like going through a programming session and saying, hey, build this room 12 by 12. Well, when you start counting ceiling tiles, what's 12 by 12, right? So going to these rooms and going to these spaces to see what does a 12 by 12 room look like is really a big deal for us. So we'll program it, and then we'll ultimately take that program with you on these tours. We have some facilities in Minneapolis. We're building a fire station, police station in Cold Spring, Minnesota right now. As Terry mentioned, we've got a few other fire stations around here, but even fire stations that we haven't done, we'll go through them if you know of one, and we'll say, what about this, what about this? The programming session, Jim will talk about a little bit. Laura will talk about conceptual site planning, and then and also conceptual designs.
Okay, the next process that Rob alluded to earlier on the previous slide is the immersion process, and it really is an opportunity for us to get to know your department, and honestly that process has already started as part of my responsibility as emergency services specialist is to get to know as much about your department as I can, and I have to, at risk of sounding disingenuous, I have to genuinely tell you as a fire service professional for over 40 years, I am very, very impressed what I saw on the internet, your 2020 report I have in front of me, your annual report, your strategic plan, all of which was very impressive. So looking forward to getting to know much more about you in person and about what you do in West Fargo. So back to the actual programming itself, we look at all the wants and needs, and we try to figure out not only what your deficiencies are now, what you're trying to overcome. I understand that you're trying to also overcome some response deficiencies in the northeast portion of your community by having that new central fire station. But we also have an opportunity to look to the future for 25 to 50 years to kind of see what your department would look like and what the expectations of the public would be. So we go through room by room and find out what the different features, different offices, and those types of things. So it's very, very specific. And again, as the last bullet point indicates, we're planning very much for the future in this process.
So from that point, then we take that program and we start our conceptual design. So this is the proverbial bubble diagram, or however you'd like to think of it. Basically, what we try and think about is how is the station going to function? So what adjacencies do we need to be next to each other? We take all of the information, the comments, the discussions, the topics that are brought up during our programming session to help guide us on this bubble diagram. The bubble diagram, we won't have windows in there, we won't have doors. It's just squares and boxes, and we'll just start to really realize, is it the right size? Does it function well? And with this, we'll start getting an overall size, which helps lead us to an overall budget, a very beginning preliminary budget, and then from there we can take this and move into schematic design. So what we start looking at then too is your site and the different site considerations. So we've looked into your site that you have selected here. We know it's right across the street from the high school and next to more engineering and Menards and some residential areas. It looks like it has some on-street parking, which we'd have to consider when we are looking at your site just for safety considerations. But Robbie, if you want to go to the next part. The things that we overall in general will look at is just how is the site going to function. So once we start getting our bubble diagram, we'll start putting it really loosely on the site and start saying, okay, how is your response traffic coming in and out? How is your volunteer parking coming in and out, and your or your paid-on-call people coming in and out, your full-time staff coming in and out? Do we have a public entity? We want to make sure we keep those all separated and make sure everyone's safe. And we need to start considering stormwater management, if we have an extrication training pad that we need to have, if we have to have an impound lot, which since you are just a fire station, we will likely not have an impound, but in case you do, we'll start figuring out where that location is. But the preliminary site discussion is equally important as the preliminary concept discussion.
So that's kind of the phase one portion of our, what we'll be presenting you. I'm passing around a deliverable that would be expected after that phase one portion of the project. Basically, again, that conceptual design and estimate, right? So this is going to get us to the point where we're going to say, all right, we've got enough information now. we can put this report together that ultimately will present, as I'm passing around there, that has that estimate, has the conceptual designs, has the building on the site, and then you have that information for the next step, and the next step being phase 2. That report would be available. We'd come and present that report to the commission and say, okay, here's where we are to date, here's what it's going to cost at this particular moment. Always high level conceptual at that point. We conservative and work our way down is the way we work as a firm. We never want to be down low and then all of a sudden have to come back and say, oh, we're over, right? And in the times we're in now with construction and materials where they're sitting at, I think that's very important type of thing. So going into phase 2 design, again, going into that schematic design report. And with your CM, you'll notice that after every one of these phases, schematic design, design development, construction documents, we're essentially stopping and doing an estimate. So we're always knowing where we are at in this process. It's not, okay, estimate in the beginning and then, finish off the building and get the bids and then realize you have a problem. We want to know right away where we are sitting throughout that whole process. And then again, bidding, construction, and 11-month post-occupancy. And you're kind of probably wondering how this is going to work between STRO and Five Bugles. So basically 5 Bugles would, essentially take you through conceptual design, and with STRO there, throughout that entire process, we would do the schematic design and the design development, and then there would be a handoff. We'd give it to the local experts then to take the construction documents and the bidding and keep going. Meanwhile, all of our mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers and our consultants will go through this whole process from start to beginning. Now when STRO gets the plans, then ultimately myself will be still involved, coming to meetings, essentially telling them those little things that have to go into a fire station to make this work. So it's a combination, and it really is a team effort in the end, and it's just, it's a graph from small to large and then back large, so it's a crossing pattern, and we're in it together in the end.
This is kind of where the fun begins in schematic design, where we move from those bubble diagrams that Laura talked about and actually get into a real live floor plan that has walls and doors, and we start looking at the massing of the building and how it affects the neighboring community. Again, together with the CM, we look at construction systems and making sure that we're providing exactly what will meet the budget, and then again kind of end up with the schematic design estimate and report. But this is kind of where the design process begins. And design development is really about honing in on that and massaging that schematic design plan and talking again in this case with a construction manager that would help us talk about, what do we really want to build this? And in today's world right now, that's a big deal with issues with supply and cost things, and there's just a lot of things to consider today. We're even having things in the West Fargo community that we're short on masons. So we used to do a lot of masonry. We only have like 2 commercial masons now. And I have people that we work with, a number of developers that just stay away from masonry because they just can't get it done. So there's some things like that we'll need to consider. But at the end of that design development, you're going to know what it looks like. You're going to know what it's going to be built out of. You're going to know, you might not know colors of maybe finishes inside the building, but you're going to know what that finish is. Is it carpet? Is it hard surface? Is it tile? What is it? Maybe just back up one more. I think this is cool to look at in terms of Five Bugles design. If you look at the 4 stations on the side, what they programmed for, and then what originally programmed and then completed, and you see that they've honed it down and made it more efficient. And you can see even in the schematic drawing to the side, it's really functions well. It's real organized well, so that reduces the square footage, which obviously reduces the cost of the project to you. So then, like Robbie said, we're going to be transitioning from design development into construction documents. So that's, when we really get our sleeves rolled up and start working with the consultants, engineers, and coming up with the actual documents that we'll be using to bid the project. And then we'll probably, Devin will probably be our lead guy on this, and then we have another gentleman by the name of Joe Jenny that helps out with our CA during that process. So we'll be at every construction meeting. We'll be working with the CM to try to solve any issues during that process, and also going through that whole bidding process that evaluating contractors and that kind of thing. So that's where we're really going to be, again, more involved, and Five Bugles will be a little less involved. But in the fact that we're using their mechanical, electrical, structural people is going to be huge from the standpoint of keeping that consistent all the way through. So this is just a possibility if you needed it. Because of Wendell's capabilities and size, they have a marketing department. We've always wanted a marketing department. But basically Devin and myself and our secretary is our marketing department, and but they can actually do things to help us if we want to give you material to put out on your Twitter page or Instagram or whatever, to keep information flowing that's right and true and not rumors. And so there's some real value to that in today's world of the media. So I think that's a super cool thing. I know you're not doing a referendum or anything, but real a benefit to having a company like this. So.
And Rob kind of mentioned the fire station expertise and the successes in the details. And like he mentioned, if you look at all the stations that Five Eagle Design has designed over the past approximately 20 plus years, with the level of experience that Steve and Robbie and Laura bring to the table. It was quite honestly, speaking from an individual who was on your side of the table years ago, it was honestly a very easy decision for us to decide to go with Five Eagle Design because of the expertise and the respect that they have in the Midwest, frankly, and now as it's growing across the country. But the photos kind of indicate just some of the things and features that we design in the stations that are just a few of the innovative things that we're proud to include in most, if not every one of the fire stations we design today. And the next slide identifies in training, and as a fire service instructor for the past 25 plus years, there's a saying in the fire service that I'm certain that the chief and deputy chief can relate to, is that you train like your life depends on it, because it does. And if you take that approach and you have the opportunity to include some of the things identified on the left of the photos there, it's a very cost-effective way to provide training at the facility. And when you look at the facility, the advantages of that, that facility will be designed or positioned in such a way to minimize the response times to response areas. So anytime you can identify an opportunity for training in that facility at that location, you're getting the benefit of that response. And actually in your RFP as well, you identify a 4-story tower. That's something we are very proud of doing, and have a number of examples to provide for that type of scenario. And it's a very, again, cost-effective way. If you're going to do a mezzanine or a 2-story station, you already have the ladders, the stairwell there as well. So going up another 2 stories is a very, very inexpensive way to provide some high quality, what we would probably characterize as low frequency but very high risk type of training events there as well. So also in your RFP, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here when it comes to the fire service, I know you've embraced the report that was done by the International Association of Fire Chiefs, voluntary, the command and command staff section of the IAFC, the report that identifies the 11 steps to minimize the potential risk of cancer for firefighters. For many years, as someone who's been in the fire service for over 40 years, we've done a pretty good job, I think actually a very good job of protecting the lives and property of others, but not as good of a job protecting our own personnel. So this slide actually is a snapshot of an article that Rob had written for Firehouse Magazine, very specifically identifying what you identified in your RFP of the importance of having a decontamination corridor, if you will, we're treating your fire station like a hazmat zone, having a cold, a warm, and a hot zone transition area. And that's just kind of a little cutout. The inlet there is kind of a cutout of actual flow of a fire station that was designed right here in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And actually that facility won an award through the Fierro Firehouse Design Award as well. So just giving you an example that we certainly know what we're doing when it comes to decontamination as an individual in the fire service. That's something that we try and strive to do routinely, and also to be innovative and thinking about the next thing. And because frankly, this is kind of an old feature that has become a best practice, thankfully, for those who are in the fire service.
All right, so the next space that we like to look at is the apparatus space, and just small details that make a good station great, right? So clearance is behind the ambulance, making sure that you can not only park the ambulance, but they have space behind it to get any sort of gurney or other materials out of the ambulance that may need to get out. We center our trench drains down the center of each apparatus space, that any water or precipitation that comes off of the apparatus will, hit the ground and roll on folks' floors underneath the apparatus bay to keep it safer. Helping with the safety issue is having in-floor radiant heating. First of all, it helps with their heating just to make sure that we maintain a comfortable temperature in the apparatus bays, but then it also dries the floors out faster, so a dry floor is a safer floor. So we like to do that. Vehicle exhaust systems, there's a lot of different ways that we can do vehicle exhaust systems, but this particular station that's on there shows the direct connect system, so we talk about that and coordinate that system. And then bringing in a lot of natural light and painting the ceilings bright white. For a long time, we didn't paint ceilings, or the fire departments didn't paint ceilings. But just having that bright white makes it very light in there. We can cut down how much energy you have to use because you don't have to turn all the lights on, and it's just a really comfortable, lovely place to be.
In the living spaces, the things that we've learned that are small but make a big difference are things like multiple microwaves and having them not next to each other, a 3-bay sink. The kitchen is the center of the home. So when everybody's in there, we want to make sure we have room for everybody. It promotes the camaraderie. Large range for multiple meals, and even multiple refrigerators and pantries to take care of all the shift work. But all these little things add up to a success.
Yeah, and speaking of little things is, again, just things like designing your dorm rooms correctly with really cool deals like double access lockers that go from the hallway into the dorm room, so you can access it from both sides. Separate tones where they can actually ring different rooms for whatever that emergency might be. You can't hardly see it back that door, that direct access to the apparatus space. There's a walk-off mat. Just little things that really make a good station a great station when you start really moving in on some of these little things. Toilet rooms that are basically non-gender. They're like little, basically bathrooms like you'd have in your home. So anybody can use one. So those are the kind of things that we're just constantly learning through the design of multiple fire stations, the way Five Bugles is doing it. So it's really exciting to see how that all comes together. And like Robbie will say, we learn things on every one, good or bad, but we learn them. So,
Rob?
Oh, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, just a comment. In regards to the adjacencies, like the direct access to the apparatus bay, one thing that we really haven't shown quite just yet is how important it is to minimize the response time, the overall response time to incidents as well. And what we continually do, and we're certainly aware of all the standards, the NFPA standards, the standard about the turnout time, to make sure you try to get at least within 80 seconds, you get crews from the time of the alarm to out in the apparatus within 80 seconds. So the adjacency to all of the living quarters and to the apparatus, all of which is designed to minimize the total response time. The only part, honestly, of the response time that we can affect in the fire service is that portion of it in regards to the design of the facility itself. So there are so many different adjacency things that we could talk about for much longer than 30 minutes, but I think it's important to point out that we are very much aware of them. We understand all the different standards that are out there, and we embrace them and try to include them in the consideration of your design.
You know, and Jim kind of hit the nail on the head there, is when you've got all these spaces and all of them want to be by the apparatus bay. So it becomes a very unique challenge to try to get everything as close to the apparatus bay as possible when you're designing these stations. You can see here, these are dorm rooms, and that door goes right out to the apparatus bay. So straight shots get you out the door as quickly as possible is what we're shooting for. Kind of elaborated, you know, experience equals cost control. So on a lot of these, again, 25 public facilities in the last 5 years, so we have that data on what these cost, right? So we have that information at our hand, so we can have accurate estimating and work with the CM as well, because they're going to have a feel of what that current market is. You know, working with that construction manager and coming up what these estimates are and as accurate as possible. We are also, like I mentioned, a construction manager, so we're serving as CM right now on 4 fire stations that we're, you know, putting up ourselves. So again, we bid them ourselves, we have that ability, and we have that information that we can pass on to your construction manager. Experienced, consistent team, we elaborated on that a lot. We know what works and what doesn't work. And then again, just that local presence with STRO, and then the national expertise are a big thing. But and this one kind of just goes through the different building materials. Terry kind of elaborated on it. You know, masons in the area are very slim. So maybe precast becomes an option for all of you. I know that's a pretty popular, we go back and forth with that, and a lot of it depends on what the mason market, if they're busy, if they're not busy, and how that works out in the end there. And again, going back, these are the 25 projects. Everything underlined in there are the ones that we've done. Jim and I were talking about this. It's actually misleading because we've built multiple fire stations for multiple clients. So it's 25 clients. I'm actually curious to see how many fire stations we've done with all those clients. But really, again, it just elaborates again on the experience factor. I don't know how we're doing for time here, but we can kind of cruise through these, you know, we're over our 30 minutes. So again, just experience and cost control going through some projects. You have all these slides in your PowerPoint and the quotes. This one's in Eau Claire. Jim kind of elaborated on that project. If you have any questions on any of these projects, I'm just going to buzz through them for the time being, but if you want to bring something up. This one's in Chippewa Falls that we just finished in 2017. Again, another quote from Chief Effler. Swamico Fire Department, we were just finished up this year over by Green Bay, Wisconsin. You want to talk a little bit about Oscar?
Station 7, it was completed in 2013, but we teamed up with Fabios at that time as well. And a lot of the things we saw in the living spaces were actually incorporated in this with a large living space, and we had 3 apparatus bays, and came in within budget for the Fargo Fire Department.
Wausau Fire Station in Wausau, Wisconsin, just finished again recently. This is a satellite station here, career department.
We did a study for the Fargo Fire Department. They were looking at a piece of property right on University, so it was kind of a cramped site, but we were able to get what they wanted on it. They ultimately decided to refurbish their main one downtown.
Janesville Career Fire Station, this one's about 30,000 square foot career fire department. Verona Fire Station is about 34,000 square feet. This is a suburb of Madison, Wisconsin. Very community that's growing. Epic Systems is based out of Verona, and their population like doubles throughout the day with all of the people coming into town. Ashland Fire Department in Ashland, Wisconsin. Again, just why us? Again, I'll elaborate on the 25 plus public safety projects. We do have, quite a few stations actually on the Minnesota side of things in the Minneapolis market that we can tour. We didn't put any in this presentation, but again, the 25 buildings in the last 5 years and the 20 studied. Our entire team, is built on collaborations. Terry mentioned we've worked together in the past. You get that national expertise with us. We are from the Midwest though, so I don't want it to feel like we're from a million miles away. I drove here yesterday, but then you also get the local expertise with STRO and knowing the market feel and how that all is. in-house emergency services specialist, I can't stress enough how that really works out nice, having that chief that has gone through that process to help with everything you got. And then again, that's, we just love what we do, and we design fire stations. With that, I'll take questions.
All right, well, thank you for the presentation, and we have a few questions that I'll just fire off right off the bat, if you're ready. All right, how many buildings today is your company involved in and where are they at? So, if you've got like 5 built projects currently, are you through schematic phase on those, or?
So you're talking just fire station facilities?
Current workload?
Current workload, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll let Stroh answer their question. On our workload, right now, I'm going to go back to the screen with the 25 buildings, and I can kind of give you a better idea right here. So right now, like I mentioned, Cold Spring, Minnesota, we're working on the design, and Fort La Crosse, we're working on their design. So basically, those top 3 are our 3 stations that we're designing right now. Farmington, New York is kind of on the hold. Riverside's under construction. Wisconsin Rapids, by the time this project becomes reality, it will be under construction. La Pointe is done. Monroe is just ending. St. Peter is a project for us in the later part of this year. Suamico is done, and Platteville's a study. So right now we have 3 or 4 fire stations under our belt, I guess you could say, with Laura and myself on that end. Obviously, Wendell's a large company, so we have a lot of other projects that we have on our plate throughout the whole company. We have 140 architects, so there's tons of other projects, but it also just, it relies on that horsepower that we do have. But one important thing to note too in all of this is, we don't switch horses. Laura and myself from our side will be the team that you see from start to finish, as I'm assuming Devin and Terry would say the exact same thing, that's the team you'll see from the day we start the first meeting and design to the day you do the ribbon cutting on the facility. So I'll let you guys answer your workload projections. Or
yeah, we're actually in the middle of just finishing up about 1 or 2, about 3 really pretty large projects, and just getting them out the door in the next month or 2, and we have a couple of smaller ones that are coming up, so we're positioned well for this. So.
Go ahead, Mark.
I guess that's not quite the answer I was looking for. Could you put it more on a percentage basis? How much time are you willing to, would you commit to this project?
I guess so how much time on a percentage basis?
Well, in reference to your availability, your commitment to the overall project, and like how much time will you guys personally put into this? Like, I guess, am I saying that right, Chief?
Maybe what you're asking is how much time. So on a normal docket of you being not busy to being so busy you can't control anything anymore?
Sure.
Where are you on that scale? 50%, 60%?
We wouldn't go after a project if we didn't think we could do it.
You don't.
How I would phrase that. Yep. It doesn't do our brand any service to do it halfway. So right now on any typical year, we've done 5 to 6 of these, and right now we have 3 or 4 of them going on. So in a percentage, you can kind of see that the workload, for this coming 6 to 8 to a year, depending on how fast you want to go, and really it's based on your schedule, not ours. We are geared up to do this work. So.
Does that answer your question? Kind of what you were thinking?
Kind of, yeah.
And if you're looking for a percentage and based hours, again, as big as our firm is for drafting and design, Laura and I will be the lead contacts, but we have a lot of people that work below us, that will put out the production of the drawings and pull this package together, right? So again, Laura and I will be the face on the field, and Jim will be the Five Bugles face of things, and we're on board for that capacity. So.
Yeah, that kind of answers the availability. So how many times have you guys worked together with Stroh and Five Bugles? You got the Fargo station, you did the university study for Fargo. Any other buildings you guys have worked together on?
Well, we were also interviewed for a Mandan fire station up in the northwest part of town. We shortlisted, we interviewed, we were selected, we sent them a contract, and it was at election time, and
Had a couple of commissioners.
I'm
We had a
familiar with
commissioner that was an
Yeah.
anti-fire station commissioner, so we never, the project, so we went through that process, we're selected, but we didn't build that one.
Yeah.
One of the important things too there that I want to, just make sure that we focus on is that our mechanical, electrical, and our consultants will be on this 100%, as will all of us. It's just going to be your strong 5 bugles in the front, and then as the process, once we get to that design development stage, then Stroh will take it from there, but then Laura and my involvement, we'll still be going to all the meetings, but someone else is going to end up, producing those drawings on Stroh's end, and ultimately the bid packages and construction administration.
I guess thank you, Mandy, my point to that availability was that, I don't think we want to be calling anybody out in Hawaii or somewhere looking for,
no.
looking for answers. I mean, I'm hoping you're saying that you're going to be here.
Yeah, I jumped in a car yesterday and drove here, and
I know Terry will be here.
Terry will be here.
Across the river, so.
Chief called me on Friday, I said I'll be there on Tuesday, so.
Yeah, and thank you, I didn't even mention that you did move around some of your personal plans to be here today, so we really do appreciate that, yeah.
It's about a 4.5-hour drive for us, so it's not a very far drive in the scheme of what we do. When you kind of think about it, we're doing fire stations, right? So it's not like we built one in Eau Claire, but all the rest of them are all over the Midwest, so we're used to traveling. I think you had a question there.
So I love your attention to detail with the dorm rooms, the bathrooms, kitchen. I think that's fantastic. Didn't hear much about outside aesthetics, so I'm wondering more about outdoor living spaces, buffering zones, that type of thing.
Sure. And Terry, you want to answer outdoor and just general aesthetics?
Yeah, that's going to be really up to you. We're going to want to do what you want to do. So, when we did the Osgood station, they really wanted kind of a traditional look to that, and, you can see the trim work around the doors and all those kind of things. We're really, and I think Five Bugles is the same way. We're really trying to be a client's architect. So we're not coming in here with a preconceived idea of what a fire station should look like. We want it to look the way you want it to look. And so we're going to give you options on that based on what we talk to you about and the information we get from you. And that's how we're going to derive that. And then obviously on your site, there'll be situations where we're going to want to position outdoor spaces and stuff that makes sense for our climate and for the staff, as well as again, proximity to the apparatus.
Very large shoulders, right? Again, it's not our building, it's your building. If you don't like something, we'll take it back and we'll look at it again, right? So fitting in what fits into the community is a really big deal, in our eyes, as well as yours. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I would just add, we mentioned all this expertise that we have, and I think you mentioned it earlier about we would never try to tell you what your fire station should look like or the things that you should have in it, but we have an idea of what's worked in other communities, that type of thing. Even with 40 years of experience, I would never tell you what's best for your department. But to the point about the site itself, we actually have a whole section in the programming, a programming program that identifies what the site, what aspects of the site would be desirable. And I know you do identify, buffer zones from adjacent properties in your RFP, and certainly that's a consideration that will be taken in very early in the process, and actually throughout the process as well. So.
Yeah, and we'll consider, like Jim said, the buffer zones. We'll consider if you want like outdoor patio space, if we have outdoor training, if we have extrication that we need to have there, if we have, a separate apparatus apron for EMS versus fire, or cold storage. We spend quite a bit of time. Like I said in the beginning when we talked about the site slide, the site is equally important to the overall design of the project as the facility itself.
And being sensitive to neighbors, right? I mean, we know everything around there. You look at the Janesville Fire Station, that was in a residential neighborhood, right? And keeping that in mind, Greenville, that fire station is in a residential neighborhood. So being mindful of the neighbors and trying to, keep things separate and just ultimately, keeping property values and various other things that are going to come up in those discussions, okay, so.
Yeah, that is something very important to us. We do have such a unique situation here where we're going to butt a school, we're going to butt condos, we're going to butt a major Wisconsin corporation, Menards, and then and then more engineering on the west side. So it's such a different deal here, but that's really important to us. That's a good point.
Yeah, and with mentioning all of your site considerations around you, one of the things that's most interesting about a facility like this is then you end up not having a backside. So you really have to pay attention to all four faces of the facility to make sure that everyone is having a nice view. And we're actually looking at that and considering that in Edina, Minnesota, where it's a really wealthy neighborhood that we're considering putting a fire station into in a park. So making sure it's aesthetically pleasing everywhere. There isn't, the ugly backside. It's lovely all the way around.
Yeah, I would just, one final point from my perspective is that we understand that communities, individuals around the fire station have kind of two approaches. If you want to move a fire station, they want to keep it in their backyard, and then there's also the not in my backyard approach. So I suspect West Fargo is no different, and you would have those challenges, but actually, again, the site, because of the individuals around you, the businesses around you, the type of occupancies around you, it's a really good fit for a fire station in that area.
Yeah, and we've done a lot of proactive work with trying to make sure that we're going to be a good neighbor, and we've used Commissioner Simmons' contacts over there to, early on in the process, talk to our neighbors in the condominiums. So we've done some legwork over there, so it's important to us.
And they support it, so that's the best part.
They do support it,
Yeah, that's great.
We've done a lot of public transparency with this project, a lot of stuff.
So that's kind of something, Terry, keep that going through the rest of the process, right? Because you don't want the rumor mill to start up, and then you just want to squash those and just get the facts out there and
Absolutely.
be upfront with it,
Yep. Do you have any more? Commissioner George, or?
Well, the only other thing I think, and this is something Commissioner Simmons had talked about, and I think I did see this on one of your designs, it looks like most of them do not have drive-through bays. I think I saw one of them that did, so I guess it sounds like you can do something that would, whatever the client wants. So I guess I was just wondering about, how
Actually,
much of that you do.
A majority of our stations would have drive-through bays, so about 90% of them. Actually, the only one that may be in there is probably Ashland that did not. That was a very difficult site, very skinny. Devin and Terry actually talked about that today when we were looking at the site. How can we make drive-throughs work? How can we do all that? So yeah, drive-through bays are definitely something that, we're going to look at and talk about on that site and see how we can best make it flow and, where we're returning, where we're leaving, how that all works out. Laura mentioned with the parking all on the street there. I'm assuming on a high school event it probably gets busy, so we got to talk about some of that stuff on there. So yeah, drive-through bays, if we can make that work, we're definitely going to look at that.
How about underground parking? That's another thing that we're looking at.
Underground parking.
Underground parking, experience in it, we've done a lot, a lot. We've been doing a lot of multifamily for some developers and constantly are doing underground parking now. It's kind of the norm almost. We're actually doing 2 levels of parking, one in the ground and one on the first floor. Fargo City Hall, whole lower level is parking. So, yeah, we've done a lot of it and have a lot of experience in laying that out. And, I have a question in terms of what are you wanting to use the underground parking for?
Well, so the first one would be to make sure we can have our staff vehicles out of the weather. We are going to, I don't think I'm putting the cart before the horse when I say we're going to have hybrid or electric staff vehicles at some point in the future. And being able to charge those or have them out of the elements would be important to us.
Yep.
We're probably going to be an early adopter on that. We're usually an early adopter on most things that come down
Yep, good idea.
pipe.
I have an electric car and it doesn't like the cold.
Yep. And then
It really doesn't like the cold.
And then we have storage needs for like palletized storage of things and keeping those out of the bay. So and it might be a personal thing for me as the fire chief, but I'm not a big fan of having pallet racks out in the bay and having all that junk laying around. It might drive me crazy.
There's a few different ways we can handle it, and as we go through it, we're going to look at staff vehicles, and a lot of it's going to, if you go down, we have to, obviously that's the more expensive portion of the project if you go down, so we'll want to see if we can fit it on the first level first, right? And then kind of work from there. As far as palletized different things, we do a lot with mezzanines and having like accessible, removable guardrails, or we've even done hoists, that come out over the apparatus bay floor where you can pick it and bring it back and put it down, just a 2-ton simple, little hoist that can get you stuff on the mezzanine. So we'll walk you through that on what's, and again with the construction manager, what's the best way to make that happen, whether it's going down or going up another story or doing something in that manner. But yeah, it's, we talked about the underground parking feature, today. Wendell Companies does, I haven't personally done an underground parking, but I know Terry has, but our company has done a lot of parking structures as well though too, so.
One more question. This is probably for Terry, in reference to the underground parking. The odds are probably good that we have a water vein going through there?
A water main?
A water vein, like?
Like a sand water vein.
Yeah, like, have you worked with those?
I'll have to admit, we've depending on the soil tests that come back, we've actually haven't done underground parking because of that. So we would rely on our soil engineer to tell us what we have and what we have capability of doing. And there are a lot of new products out there that work really well for waterproofing a lower level. In fact, you can go to the point of actually waterproofing the bottom of the, basically the slab and footings of it as well. So there's some really interesting products out there. Again, you're going to really want them because it's not going to be inexpensive. But, waterproofing the lower level on a normal basis, even if it's a bit of a wet site, is not that difficult. It's more if that's affecting soil capacity, that kind of thing. So we've hit that around here on just occasion where all of a sudden we have this project that we thought we're going to have underground parking and we can't because it just is too cost prohibitive and difficult to do. So.
Okay.
Yeah, we could be in that boat. We'll figure it out when we get to that point, but, yeah.
That would be something, we probably ask you, and we would typically we arrange it for you, and we'll put out a small RFP to soil testing companies. You'll get 3 of them in town, and we'll, once we have just even a reasonable idea of a footprint and have that done as soon as we could. So, I've had clients where we have actually just done a series of them in the property, knowing it's going to be about in that area and not necessarily pinpoint it. Typically, we wait till we have an outline of the building, but in this case, you might want to just even do a couple where we think we might have an issue and see what that looks like.
When you bought the facility, did you do any phase 1s or phase 2s to take any borings or anything like that?
No.
Yeah, soil test is, especially for a facility like this, is maybe $1,000 a pop, $800 a pop. Do a couple of those right away, and
well worth doing it though. Well worth paying to do that because we have problems here. That's why I bring it up. So.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Anything? Also, I got 2 more follow-ups. Anything, Kendall? No? So, in terms of any issues, since you guys are working out in the Midwest, and then Terry, you guys are working here locally, we've run into, or we're getting some questions from some of the CMs that may want to look at this project, asking us what our opinions are on availability of materials and any shortages of labor and that kind of stuff. From your guys' perspective, just so we know, what are you seeing here, Midwest-wise and then locally, so we can be prepared for anything that might
So I can
shock
start on
us.
the Midwest rise, and what we're hearing in, our market is, there is an issue with bar joists in specific. I think that's the big thing right now, and it's a countrywide thing. It's not just a Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota type of thing. Lumber, we've heard a lot about lumber. A facility like this, not a lot of lumber probably going into it, so probably not of a large concern, for us on that one. But it's the steels right now are the one thing that are popping up on our radar. You're at the beginning stages, so hopefully by the time we get to the point where we're bidding and breaking ground, maybe some of that'll free up. But that's really what our current clients that are going into the bidding right now are nervous about. We're hearing nightmare stories about, 8 months to get bar joists on a project, So that's what we're hearing on. But again, we've got 3 or 4 of them bidding here in the next, month or 2, and we're going to have a really good feel on what's going to happen there. Going back to that though, maybe it's something where we do precast roofs and precast walls and just build the whole thing out of concrete too, so that's where that CM's going to say, yeah, you're going to wait 8 months for bar joists, but let's just put double T roof system on the roof, and the shell will be up in, a month it usually takes, and then it sits there and it seems like nothing's going on for a month because the building went up so fast.
Yeah.
But, thinking of those different materials on the construction management side and working with them and saying, "But use this instead of that because it's going to take forever to get that one product."
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're seeing on our end, and I don't know if that's anything
Yeah,
worth elaborating on.
interestingly enough, concrete hasn't gone up a lot. So, that might be one of those things where precast might make more sense in some instances. Certainly, I think it'd be, it might just be timing from the standpoint of block work. The nice thing, and we do this a lot, so we work with a couple of engineers in town doing buildings on water treatment plants and stuff like that. And, we're designing block buildings that are 8-inch, CMU blocks, and just so happens that the precast plank is 8 inches. So the details hardly change, and typically we've been, depending on the contractor actually come in and tell us, we'd rather do this out of precast, we can do it this much faster, we can do it, this much, sometimes cheaper even. Like Robbie said, there's very little wood in it. The whole idea of possibly building it out of concrete planks, you end up basically just, bomb-proofed your fire station. So, and obviously in emergency services, you certainly want that fire station to be standing there if we have a natural disaster of some kind. So, I think there's a lot of things to go through, and obviously that's the really nice thing about having a CM on track would be to have conversations with them about that, because that's what's happening. We have a little bit of a labor shortage, probably not as bad as a lot of areas. We're doing some projects for Bell Bank and all over the country. I'm actually doing one in Arizona, and they're having just a horrible time trying to find people. You just can't find people anywhere. So I think we're a little bit better suited here. You would hear contractors tell you that it's still hard to find people, but it's been like that for a long time. I think it's more about finding good people than anything. They're running through people,
Yeah.
I think, a lot. So
That makes
The
sense.
labor, the same thing in the Midwest is we're not seeing a huge labor issue on our contractors. They're still hungry by us. It's just the products in the end that we're seeing, so.
Okay. The last question I had was relating to like a fee schedule, and being that you guys are partnering on this, so number one, do you have a general ballpark of what your fee schedule would be if you're looking at a percentage of the total project or what you're doing? And then since there's two entities working together, how do you guys split that? Or if that's something proprietary, you don't want to let us know.
Yeah. Or something. So basically, Terry and Devin, I talked about this on the way here. Right now we don't know what you're building other than we see $10 million CIP, right? So we don't know if it's 10 million, we don't know if it's 8 million, we don't know exactly what it is. So what we usually would do in this instance is that phase one, and that's that phase report that we put through. And once we get that estimate and we know what we're building, so we would charge you X amount of dollars, to do the phase one portion of that study in the contract. And then label our contract on a cost of work, because obviously if it's going to be anywhere between 6 and 7%. But the bigger it is, the percent goes down, right? So in that contract, we would just put some parameters in there. If the building's $8 million, it'll be 6.5%. If it's $6 million, it'll be 7%. If it's 10 million, it'll be 6%. Label that out and negotiate with you out there, because again, it's not fair for us to throw a number to you when at this point you don't know what that magic number is, right? So anywhere between 6 and 7% we're going to land. And again, if it's in that $10 million range, we're going to be in that 6% range. As far as splitting it up, it's really going to come down to looking at it and doing it in hours and dividing it, with our MEP team and ours, and then we got consultants and everything else. It just becomes a negotiation between all of us to figure out where we sit in that world. But the going rate of architectural fees is in 6 or 7%, so that's what's there, and that's ultimately what we have to split up and share and get the project done for all of you. So Yeah, that's kind of.
So we don't worry about
problem in the past, so.
No.
So we don't worry about your partnership or any of that, 6 or 7%, whatever that is, that's what we pay. You
Yep.
deal with the rest of it,
Yeah,
correct?
Yeah, so we would be ultimately the lead, and then we would have sub-consultants going out through, and we would hold the contracts, and then everybody would be under us and negotiated all the way through there. And again, it's never really an issue because there's a portion of money there, and we have to figure out how best to divvy it up among all of us, so.
All right. Anything else from anyone?
No.
No? Okay.
All right.
Well, we appreciate you guys coming in.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity again, and
Very
it's a
exciting.
very exciting project, and hopefully we'll get a chance to see you all again and let us know, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. All right, thank you.
All right.
All right, thanks Laura and Jim.
Thanks so much.
Yep, thank you. Look forward to meeting everyone.
What time's the next one? We're probably already on.
Oh,
I'm going to.
The Belvin project you bring up are interesting to me because I'm actually a full-time employee of Belvin.
thought you were familiar.
Okay, we can go ahead and get started. We'll do a quick brief of what we're doing today. So this is the first of 3 interviews for architectural firms for the West Fargo Fire Department Headquarters project. My name is Dan Fuller. I'm the fire chief here for the city of West Fargo. And I'll have everyone just introduce themselves up here on the panel and then turn it over to you, Alan.
I'm Mandy George, I'm a West Fargo City Commissioner, and the fire department is a secondary corporation.
I'm Jim Larson. I'm Finance Director for the City of West Fargo.
Hello, I'm Tina Fisk. I'm City Administrator for the City of West Fargo.
I'm Mark Simmons, West Fargo City Commissioner
Jim Ross, Deputy Chief with Fire Department.
Turn them off. Got to get it on.
Yep, there you go.
About that. Thank you, Emily.
The buttons are up on the corner. Red is off, green is on. So, okay, Alan, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Well, first of all, we really appreciate this opportunity to speak to you. Thank you for the trust in interviewing us and talking to us about our qualifications. We take that trust very seriously. We love these type of projects. Our firm does a lot of medical work, a lot of wellness work, and a lot of first response type work. And that type of work we found to be very rewarding. Obviously, we're hoping that we can serve those who serve us. And those projects have a lot of community well-being, and they're a very rewarding project for us to work on. So with that, we're going to get into the bulk of our presentation, but obviously today is Firefighters Day, and it's also May 4th. So may the 4th be with us all today as we move forward. I'm going to introduce our team. This team is the team led by EAPC, and it includes Confluence, Landscape Design, and Moore Engineering as our civil engineers. We're going to do individual introductions right now. My name is Alan Dostert. I am the president and CEO of EAPC. My role on this project would be the principal in charge and the architect of record. Further, my job is to make sure that our staff, our team, has the resources in terms of man hours and manpower and expertise to make sure that your project stays on schedule and is completed to meet your functionality. Rodney?
My name is Rodney Bischoff. I'm a project designer and project manager for EAPC, and I'll be filling those roles on this potential project as well. I'll actually be co-project managers with Chris, so you'll see me a lot with programming and design, and then development of the construction documents. And Chris? Hi, Chris Thomas. I'm with the APC. I'll be the co-project manager, like Roddy said, in charge of kind of the administrative things, contracts, those types of things, just helping take some of that load off of Rodney during the design phase. Brian?
Brian Reinertz. I'm with Confluence. I'll be I am the office lead and the associate principal in the Fargo office. I'll be coordinating closely with more engineering on the site design, and then we'll be leading the landscape design.
This team that you see on your screen, and these folks, the four of us in the room, along with representatives from our civil engineering group, from Moore Engineering, we are a tested and proved team. This team has worked together. We're currently just kind of finishing up the first, where we're taking bids on the first package, what's called the CWA, the Career Workforce Academy. It's a $30 million project for NDSCS's presence here in Fargo. So this is the group that's doing that project, so there's no question about how well we work together, or if we work together well. We've been doing this now, we've been working together for a year and a half on that project, and that project's going very, very well. So I'd like to do EAPC by the numbers. And this is something that we like to do in each project. EAPC is 120 employees. In the summer, we can go up to 130 with our interns and so forth, but we've been at 100, 120, 130 for many years now. Our firm has been active, has been incorporated for 54 years. We are the oldest active firm in North Dakota, AE firm, and architecture firm. We have 10 offices across the upper Midwest, and we actually, one of those, well, 9 offices across the upper Midwest, and we have an office in Phoenix as well. So we have 10 offices total across our world that we work in. The important thing on this slide that I'd like you to remember is we've done well over 100 first response type projects. I think our credentials within the state of North Dakota in terms of a local firm, we have as much experience as anyone that you'll talk to today. So that's an important component. So I'll turn over to Brian to do Confluence by the numbers.
Yeah, so about a little back history, less than 18 months ago, Confluence approached Lionel about 18 months ago. We ended up taking a look at it, and really our values matched. So we went through a merger back in 2020, and what it has allowed us to do is have a deeper bench in the expertise of landscape architecture. So as you can see, we now have 70 specialists throughout the Midwest in 9 different offices that we can pull from. Locally we've done several projects with the city of West Fargo, completed some pretty significant ones. Currently the Cheyenne Streetscape, which is now under construction, if you've been downtown at all. We've worked with Epic companies on several projects, specifically the Lights Plaza, and then we've worked really closely with DEPC on the POW MIA Plaza as well in downtown West Fargo. And with a lot of these projects, we've also worked very closely with Moore Engineering on several of those projects.
Thanks. This next part, and the next pieces that we're going to talk about are specifically out of the RFP. So we're following the RFP format at this point very closely. So the first thing we want to talk about as we go forward is our relevant experience. And rather than replicate and go through a bunch of images that were already in our proposal, I just want to really have you take a look at this slide. And the important thing in this slide I really think is the second line. We've worked with 10 different fire districts in North Dakota. But 50 plus projects just in North Dakota itself, and as I said before, over 100 emergency response projects. But when you look at this, we've worked for all the career facilities across North Dakota. And not only is that important, but I think what's equally important is we've done multiple projects. And the fire group is a very strong group of folks, and they talk a lot, and they communicate back and forth a lot. So you can earn their confidence when you work hard, but you can be on the out really quick if you don't continue to work with them very well. So you don't get a lot of repeat work if you don't perform. So we're very proud of the fact that most of these career departments have hired us time and time again, and that's one of the things we're very proud about. And we work hard to maintain that trust with them, and we'll work equally hard to maintain and develop that trust with you folks as well.
I'm just going to go through a couple projects that Confluence has been involved in, and one of them is down in Kansas, Lenexa, Kansas. It was a LEED Silver project that was actually completed on a existing city-owned parcel, very similar to the same size that you guys have currently right now. Of course, as you can see from the plan view, it's a different shape than what we're dealing with. But some of the things that we ended up doing was using a lot of native plant material to minimize water usage, but also over time minimize the maintenance that is needed on the site. We integrated stormwater rain garden basins into the parking lot, one to control the stormwater, but also two to control the pollutants that are going into the city system. One of the things that was actually pretty fun about this project is that a green roof was installed on a portion of the roof's project, or excuse me, on the roof of the project, and it was actually implemented by the city itself to create a study to see if this is something that they want to continue on future city buildings. Next slide, please. This is the Iowa Firefighters Memorial. This was a memorial that was intended to, honor the spirit, the courage, and the service of all the firefighters, the past, the present, and the future. This memorial is in a very much of a park-like setting, so it kind of has that really reflective environment to it. And then there was a bronze sculpture that was commissioned by a local artist, and then there is granite memorial walls that commemorate the ones that have gone before us. And then this is one that I'm sure a few of you are familiar with, but this is just a great example of the collaborative work that we've done with the city of West Fargo, as well as working closely with Moore Engineering. This project really helped create the unique experience that you're currently getting downtown, but also the future experiences that are going to be happening downtown, as well as shaping the development of downtown in the future.
So we're very excited to have Confluence on our team. Obviously, working together, it's a great relationship. We worked together in the past, but working forward and knowing that they have worked on fire stations and knowing that they have sort of that fallen hero experience as well. And not that that's part of your program, but we're aware of the fact that there's some things you're looking at on this site, and that potentially is one of those things that can be incorporated into the site, along with a potential dispatch station. So a lot of those sort of things, we have that understanding of what could potentially be on the site, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But the next piece we want to talk about is really our performance in terms of references and evaluations. And I could list all the references of all the fire chiefs that we've worked with across the state, but I chose to put a couple of quotes here. You can read those at your leisure, but what we really strive for is those lifelong relationships. And we work hard, as I said before, we work hard to develop those, maintain them, and then, like I said before, we want to do the same with you folks as well. So the next we're going to talk about affordability and design on comparable projects. And this is going to be, Alan's going to get a little long-winded in this one. There's 5 items across the top of this page. High quality, functions, technical aspects, aesthetics, and economic design. I'm going to talk a little bit about those relative to how we work those into our projects. In terms of high quality, it's a municipal project. You don't have time and money to sink into projects and sort of repair projects on an annual basis. Your people who are working in these stations, they have training to do, they have things to do. They don't need to be painting, maintaining, repairing, those sort of things. So we really strive to use high quality materials, especially when we're looking at the apparatus bays. Even if we're doing a wood frame quarters and a wood framed office area, we still really try to work into our budgets as whenever we possibly can, concrete block, glazed block, burnished block, those sort of things, so we really put quality products where the maintenance is necessary. So that whole idea in terms of high quality, we really equate that to durability and sort of standing the test of time on these projects. When we talk about functions,
I mean, we want to make sure we're within that 75 feet of an engine. We want to make sure the flow from the quarters, all parts of the quarters, as well as the sleeping quarters themselves, are direct, unobscured. We also want to be very careful about how that return circulation comes back into the quarters in terms of controlling contaminants, which is a very big thing in station design. So those are all those sort of things we look at in terms of functionality. When we look at technical aspects, we have done enough of these that we know the do's and don'ts. Simple things like back in the day, everyone used top filling hoses for their trucks. I mean, we just don't put people on top of vehicles and have them put themselves in harm's way in a building like that. So we're using fills from below. We're very careful about our exhaust systems that we use. And here's just a simple example of the sort of things we've learned. Paging in an apparatus bay is always a problem. There always seems to be a lack of fidelity, there's an echo, there's fuzz, there's all these sort of things. And we found out that there's a simple solution to that. If you do more speakers and turn the volume down, it's a whole lot easier to hear. And you don't have this distortion and this problem listening to the page when you're actually in the apparatus bay or in the bays working. So that's just one of many aspects that we look at in terms of technology. Aesthetics, we're always trying to look at the facilities when we design them in terms of the context, in terms of what's around them. A lot of the satellite stations we do end up in neighborhoods. The building in the first circle on this sheet happens to be the new facility that was recently bid for Minnet. It is right snugged up against a residential neighborhood. So how do you do a high bay response apparatus facility and next to a residential group of houses? How does it fit? Well, we've always looked at ways to break those masses down. Now, you're not doing a satellite station here, and this is more of a commercial area, but if you take a look at the building on the far right, this one's a little bit older now, but this building is done in Grand Forks. It's what we call the Bronson property. This used to be a white brick facility in Grand Forks, and the glazed brick was spalling, and it was just really in disrepair. Shortly before we did this project, the Ingolstadt Arena was put in, and this vernacular, we call it the Bronson property vernacular, showed up with this dark brick and a lot of precast. So we ended up recladding this building. Rather than tuck pointing and trying to carve out brick and fix the glazed brick, which would most likely become a problem again because it was already 25, 30 years old, we decided to reclad the whole building. And so we gave it an appropriate look for the area it was in. And basically, Pete O'Neill was the chief when we did this particular project, and it gave this building a whole new lease on life. People had commented to him, "Pete, I didn't know you tore the station down." Well, we didn't tear the station down. We just changed it dramatically. So those are a couple of aspects when we take a look at aesthetics. And I kind of touched a little bit on economic design. We can certainly use wood framing when we do a lot of the satellite projects. We can take a look at how we can do things cheaper. But we always want to take that economic filter and overlay it with quality and durability. So sometimes first cost isn't the best cost in terms of what you do. So we want to make sure that these facilities make sense and we use your money wisely. The next piece we're going to talk about is really our ability to produce this project and stay on schedule, on budget, and work through your timeline.
And just to add on to that, the Columbia Road Station in Grand Forks, I had to remind Alan, I was a student. I remember drawing brick patterns on that building several times. So did a couple different concepts. So really paying attention to detail and looking at the options that are available for the building. So like I said, that was work I did as a student, so it's kind of fun to see it develop and continue on in the future. The other part of a project, go ahead.
Can I make sure your microphone's on?
Yep, I think, yep. No problem. The other important part of the project, of course, is project schedule and making sure that the building is constructed with your goals in mind. So we'll work directly with you to develop that schedule and really establish those milestones for the project. We've been introducing a strategic planning session with our project, so we'll, as an entire team, meet together to establish those initial milestones and also look at the responsibilities for everyone on the team. And that also includes you as the owner group, but everyone on the design team as well. And then we will continue the process with having weekly check-in meetings to make sure that tasks are being completed or where maybe the schedule has to adjust to meet those overall goals.
One of the things that we have been doing in the large projects is doing what we call pull scheduling or pull planning. And Rodney and I have worked together on the CWA project. And I don't know, how many points of contact do we have on that graph? A couple hundred? Right. In terms of milestones. And we take that process and we overlay it in all our projects to make sure that we're working through all those milestones on the design. And we also incorporate your contractor. And we're assuming this is going to go through a CM at risk. So we would have that contractor in that discussion, and all those points along their process will be plotted out as well. So this will be a well-scheduled, well-thought-out approach.
Well, and I was just going to mention too, part of that discussion, and Chris is going to hit on this, but working on the budget with the schedule, and Chris and I have worked on some USDA-funded projects for fire stations, and I will say that working on federal projects definitely hones in your skills for budget management and budget tracking. So, and Chris, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Rodney. Yeah, just want to touch a little bit on budget and how we try to make sure that we're keeping all the pieces in line. We look at the three pieces of the design. We need to look at quality, we need to look at the size of the facility, and we also need to look at the funds available. So those three pieces kind of create a three-peg stool, right? So if your quality and your size are what is kind of driving your project, well then we have to make sure that the budget is big enough to create that project. But if you don't have the budget, we need to look at size, we need to look at quality, and how can we adjust those three pieces to make sure that we've got one solid piece and one solid budget moving through the design phase. And if you look at the kind of asteroid looking graph up there, you can see the quality and the square footage and the cost all come together in that kind of center triangle, and that's the kind of the sweet spot of where we're looking to be coming out of the SD and the DD packages, and when we go into the CDs, the construction documents, making sure that our budget is sitting right within that triangle so that you're getting the quality, the size, and within your budget.
This is such a simple formula, and it is missed by so many architects and engineers and design teams. It's unbelievable. You cannot go from schematics into design development without this imbalance. We can control any two of these items. If you have a set budget and you have a program that says we have to have this many square feet, then we have certain decisions we have to make on the quality. If you want a 50-year usable life and you want to make sure this thing stands the test of time in terms of quality, and you have a set budget, then sometimes we have to pare back the square feet. And it's so simple, and yet is so often missed, it's unbelievable. And we just absolutely make sure that we do not advance from one phase to the next until this is in balance.
Just looking at a couple options on how we try to control that budget. Obviously, in today's market, we're in a little bit of a volatile bidding environment. Some things we want to look at is making sure we get all the partners in at the right time. If we're going to have a CM, we get them on board right away so that we can work through some of those items there. Quality estimates, making sure we're checking in with the industry leaders, checking with the steel guys, checking with the concrete guys. You know, are we having a shortage of rebar or anything like that? Making sure that we're kind of on top of all those pieces in the market that we're working in here so that we have all of those things put together. How do we look at counteracting that through the bidding phase? Alternates, obviously, we want to make sure that we're trying to prepare for some of those things so we don't have to go rebidding and those types of things. Industry awareness, timing, make sure we don't have another big project bidding at the same time. Get good quality bids, multiple bids on all of our pieces. So just some of those things that we can try to control the budget and make sure that we're getting through during the bidding phase and being aware of what's going on.
The next part we're going to talk about is basically our abilities, our qualifications, our credentials. And quite frankly, how does a AE firm, a design firm, how do we stay in front of that curve in terms of keeping our tools honed to do your work? First and foremost, we attend
fire schools across the region. We attend on an annual basis to fire schools in Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota. It's a regular thing. We plan for it. We bring our team of people who do first response facilities to those all the time. The COVID cut in on that a little bit this last year, so it was curtailed for 1 year, most of those environments, but we're back on track to attend those. And we typically will host a booth, and it does a couple things for us. We don't just go to a fire school just to be seen. We meet the vendors, we see the equipment, we see department heads from all over the state in which we're attending, and we find out what's the latest and greatest, what are their concerns, what's the dialogue, what's happening. So in order for us to stay tuned in, and in a small firm in North Dakota, and even though we have 120 people, in the big scheme of things, we're still a small firm. And so how do we stay plugged in? So that's one way we do it. Another thing that we do, and I've done personally, is contribute to a lot of the publications. Wrote a paper with one of the chiefs in the state, and we happened to write it about a facility that they were redoing in Minot, the airport facility in Minot. And it is about controlling the contaminants. There's a lot of demographics that are out there. I'm not 100% sure of the start date, but shortly after 2000, I want to say from like 2004 on, 60% of the deaths of firefighters are cancer related. They're 9% more likely to be diagnosed with cancer than the public, and 12% more likely to die of cancer than the public. So this is a serious thing, and this is something that we have front and center in terms of our facilities. It's not enough just to make sure it functions and the doors are the right size and you have all the equipment placed correctly, but you have to think about the safety of the people who are living there. This is their homes for a third of their lives. So we're very serious about that. We wrote an article about the renovation of that facility in Minot. It started out, another consultant had put together a price tag in their study and said this is a $2.2 million project. The city manager came back to me and said, Alan, we've got 1.2 to spend. Yeah, cut $1 million out of it. I'm like, oh my word. So we sat down and took a look at it, and quite frankly, the reduction of that budget allowed us to really synthesize this thing down to its basic components. And those two little graphics at the bottom basically show the before and after. I mean, it was just a sad facility. It was airport facility, so one bay was the ARF bay, responded to the airport and to the runway, and the other side was a structural bay which responded to the neighborhood. There's not a lot of those out there in the world, but they happen to have one, and their barracks design, with just a series of bunk beds, had direct doors going into both bays. And most of the circulation in the facility, I'll just point this out real quick, if I can over here, most of the circulation in the facility was along this red area. That was actually a corridor. It was part of the bay. So when we redid this, we took that area and we captured it with a wall, and we separated it from the bay, and that became kind of the circulation spine from the front door. And the only thing we added was this sort of S-shaped piece right here. And the rest of this we remodeled. So we took the exercise area out of the bay, you know, those areas where you're working out and you're breathing the deepest inside a bay, probably not a good situation for the health of the firefighters that use that. So we created a exercise area. Now it's not pointing anymore. But anyways, we created an exercise area, and we separated those functions so that there was always a transition zone between the bays and the sleeping quarters and the living quarters for the firefighters that work there. So that's an important part. The other thing is understanding first responder demographics. And this is something that's become even the most relevant in terms of what we're doing today. The reality of first responders, whether it be fire, police, ambulance, EMS, is they see a lot of trauma, and they bring that home with them. And so how can the building respond to those concerns? How can the building be a place that's soothing and you can unload? Because even though you come back to your home and you're sleeping in this facility, you're still on call. And does that stress ever really go away? So there's a lot of things that the built environment can do. One, it needs to be comfortable. It needs to be inviting. It needs to use natural materials, a lot of daylight, the circadian rhythms, the day and night. I mean, after 3 or 4 calls in a 2-day period, or whatever your shift might be, you know, what time is it? Where am I? What am I doing? I mean, those sort of things become real. And so incorporating daylight into not only the living quarters, but the work areas, into the bays, becomes an important thing. That progression of time.
making sure the building flows well, is open, it's comfortable, it's inviting. All those sort of things we look at in terms of helping to offset that stress that's part of their daily life. The other piece is really a technical component. Years ago, a call would come in, and a lot of departments, the call would hit every station in the entire department, whether you were the one responding to it or not. Well, that is kind of a thing of the past in terms of how we do dispatching, but that actual call, when it hits the facility, we do soft startup. The lights don't just come on, and immediately you don't have this blaring announcement overhead. You don't get jumped right out of bed. We do soft startups. That's just one of the many aspects we take a look at. And there's no one thing that is the key or the smoking gun, but you have to incorporate all of those. And that's another big, big part of what we try to work into our designs. So that whole understanding of the demographics of both the cancer and the first responder piece is something that we take very seriously. We work at that and we study it, and it's something that we don't just figure we're seasoned veterans and masters of it day one, or that we've gone through it. We work on that and we hone those skills all the time. The next piece we want to talk about is kind of more of a shoe shining thing. It's just looking at our existing workload. This diagram was part of our RFP, and it basically shows the level of commitment that each of us on the team have, the entire team. If you synthesize this down, we're basically 50% covered. So we have half of our time to designate to this project coming up. The other aspect that I look at as president of our company is where are we at with our backlog of work as a company. We do about $20 million worth of gross fees annually, our firm. We're at about $8 million right now. Our fiscal year ends in October. So we have a pretty good chunk of our dance card to fill. So this project will fit very well, and we will not be stressed whatsoever in terms of taking this project on. So the last piece we want to talk about is really not so much about us anymore and responding to that RFP, but what can this site be? So there's a series of graphics we have here, and I really hope I can get this thing to work again. I don't think it's going to work. Anyway, this first drawing is very simple. It's just the base plan of the site. There's nothing special here, other than it's notable that there's an easement that cuts this site in half. And so how do we make this site work? Well, Chief asked me a couple of those questions early on. Will this building fit? So this is an early sketch. This is one of those things we did maybe a year ago already, something like that, in terms of if we have so many square feet in administration, so many square feet in quarters, and so many feet of operations, how will this fit? And of course, I think in most designs today, we really would like to have at least the response bay be a drive-through. With this being sided on three sides with other property and without an alley access, this becomes a little difficult to do a drive-through. So we have developed a number of sites across North Dakota, a couple in Bismarck, 2 in Minot, here in Fargo. We've looked at this back when Chief Hoover was looking at a couple of projects. And it's a situation where you drive up, you square to the building and back up. So we're right downtown Fargo, and so we see what happens in the downtown station. A couple of firefighters jump off the truck every time they have to stop traffic, and everyone stops and they back in the facility. Well, obviously it's not a good thing to do in the winter. It's not a good thing to do anytime because you're interrupting traffic flow. So we've developed a series, and we know what those radiuses are that the equipment need in order to drive onto the site, square the vehicle up, and then back into the bay without interrupting traffic, without even interrupting pedestrian flow along a sidewalk. So that's how we approach the use of this site. You can see on the right-hand side there's sort of that entry level and then the apron. And the key is basically minimum radiuses of 25 to 30 feet on the inside, and you have to be able to square up about 80 feet of apron in front of the building in order to get the equipment squared up to the building again. So that's what we started with. And of course there were some parking concerns, and we just looked at the site and it fit. So as we move forward, we said, okay, that was a concept we put together really quick to see how it would work, and we put some budgets and programs together based on that. So we sat back and said, let's truly look at a site analysis. And this is there's just a lot of graphs, a lot of symbols and stuff here, but suffice it to say, obviously the north end of the site is going to be the active end. The south end is going to be quiet. If we're going to do quarters and we're going to put outside space for the firefighters, we're going to want to be on the south end. We look at access points, and that
easement that goes right down the middle, it certainly would make sense, since we can't build on it, it would make sense to make that vehicle access and vehicle flow, so that we're not losing it in terms of a contributing component to the site. So that's basically what we're looking at. If you look at that south end, I mean, basically it's like Fenway Park, the big green monster, the two buildings that Menards has there. And how do we deal with that? How do we buffer that? How do we make this building serve the public without having those sort of things affect us too much? So with that, we in the last couple of days put together some concepts. It's hard to see on this screen. I think on your screens it should be pretty clear, and on the screen over here it's very clear. The difference between this and what I originally started with Chief Fuller on is we are looking at parking underneath the building and putting 10 stalls under the building and having some support space for some storage and some maybe palletized equipment that could be brought in and out readily. And that means a ramp. And that ramp's got to be at least 60 to 70 feet long, minimum. So that starts becoming a big part of the site. So when we laid this out, I really wish this worked. I'm going to kind of walk up. Well, I need to be at the mic. Why don't you walk up there real quick? Basically, we have three components to the project. We have the administrative component, we have the quarters, and we have the operations, or the response bay, if you will. So the way, when we did that analysis of the site, it supports what we originally drew up for Chief Fuller, in that the quarters need to be separate from the public space, but they need to be direct access to the operations. In the same token, if this is going to be a public building, and the public is going to come to this building and see inspectors or fire people, personnel, much more than any satellite, we need to separate that public function from the response bay. So you can see the front door, if you will, is right in that corner. And knowing that there was a component that was being talked about, or at least bantered about, is there a opportunity to do a fallen heroes sort of component on this site? Well, rather than making it a standalone piece on the other side of the site, we said, what if we make this right at the front door? So everyone who uses this building uses that memorial. And I think it could, I mean, it's something that will get visited every day, not just occasionally. It'll be front and center, and it can be a very active part, and it can be really contributing to the aesthetics of the project as well. So I think it's something to embrace and not sort of put over on the side, and we would really recommend and like to take a look at incorporating that into the arrival sequence of this building. Now, when the building itself, and Rodney's going to talk about the design, we've kind of it's a two-story administrative suite with parking underneath. And those 2 stories are stratified like this. We have plenty of space on the first floor for the training component. And that could be very, very public in terms of training people, from firefighters from all different stations and probably even different departments. Rural volunteer stations come out and use this and so forth. So we really want to have that circulation separate from your administrative group. So if the administrative people are upstairs, and that first floor is that large training room and breakout rooms and public restrooms and that sort of public arrival space, this building and this site makes a lot of sense, even with the easement going right down the center. It seems to work pretty well. And with that, I'm going to let Rodney talk a little bit about the actual concepts that we came up with.
Sure. Oh, and just quick looking at the site plan too, just to note on the south side of the larger parking lot there, obviously providing parking for the visitors and guests and trainees, but there is space for expansion or another facility or another building to be able to also utilize the site. So also looking at expansion opportunities. And actually even on the apparatus bays, planning for an additional 2 bays on the end of the building. So again, planning for that expansion. We want to make sure that the city of West Fargo isn't getting smaller, so be able to grow with the city.
So if you look at that drive, the entry drive, the reason it's snugged up to that east edge of the property is to allow those 2 bays to happen past that hose tower and still be able to drive in and back up. Even though that apron and that expense isn't incurred right now, just getting that far enough over so it works in the future is important. And the large sort of dark area just above the parking is, you could easily put a 14,000 square foot building there. Now I've worked a little bit with Steve
fire chief in Fargo, and he talked about a 12,000 square foot dispatch center. Now, I know this is one of those potential locations. It's not necessarily set, but it would certainly fit. And it's important to understand that our planning of the site allows that to happen on this site. So even though it might not be decided that that's where it goes, we could do this facility without any impact on it, without preventing you from making that decision.
Want to jump to the next slide?
Is there not enough room for this?
So in looking at a concept for the building, first we want to reiterate that's exactly all this is a concept, just a tool to convey some of the things we're thinking about. We obviously need to work directly with you to develop what the building actually looks like. But in this image you can see again what Alan was speaking to, that entry sequence and using that plaza and that outdoor space as a transition space into the interior of the building. And that'll be the challenge for Brian as the landscape architect for designing that sequence and how do we bring inside and outside together. And not only that, training obviously takes place. There are many times you want to be able to step outside and take some time to yourself as well. And then also outdoor space for the firefighters, a private patio area off of the living quarters as well. So the landscape really is an integral part of what the building could be. The other part in this design concept, Alan talked about access to natural light, getting as much windows, and this concept's fairly open at the entrance, but again that would carry through to the rest of the building as well, because it's just as important to have that natural light in the apparatus space, and as Alan said, in the living quarters it's even more so. So trying to create opportunities to bring that light into the building. Another part is branding. It is important. This is a civic building. It's a building that the community definitely will take pride in. And also identifying it as a fire station. So what are some of those branding items that we could do to make sure that it appears as the fire station, but also, and again, exhibits that civic pride for the city of West Fargo?
If I could just interject one thing, I don't know that we have images of it, but the fact that the hose tower was part of the program, those hose towers are very iconic in terms of identifying a fire station. But the thing that we're doing with those nowadays, they're not just hose towers. I mean, you could use the sloped apron to drain the hoses out and use a hose dryer. You don't necessarily have to have a hose tower. But hose towers are really a great training facility because we can do shutter doors both inside and outside. So they can do training when it's nice out. They can do training right in the bay when it's nasty out, and they can rappel from one opening above and come into an opening below. There's just lots of opportunities, and we look for those all the time when we do facilities like this. So that hose tower is more than just an iconic symbol. It can be a very valuable training component as well.
So in that picture, where's the tower you're referring with? Is that the tower right here?
Actually, the tower would be to the far.
Okay, not right
in
out
that, you can see it. Go back to there. The tower's in the far left corner, and that tower, left corner.
Yeah.
Of the,
Okay. So it's away from the entrance.
And then the future bays would add to that, and that tower would be kind of a break point between those future bays and the existing bays. And so, and that would give it a nice vertical component and some branding that would be very identifiable in that neighborhood, without overpowering, without being, crazy, overpowering to the residential units on the east side.
And then, I was just going to say, another part of that too is material selection, looking at, especially when we look at interior materials. Again, the firefighters are living here, so how to make that as home-like as possible. Use of natural materials, and maybe soften some of those spaces a little bit more than what you may see in some older station design.
I have a question. So earlier on you showed a lot of really great green space and outdoor living, which I really, really love. With this particular design, I know it's just an initial concept, but I see a lot of concrete. You had mentioned having an outdoor living area. I'm just wondering how you see that or where that would go, kind of,
go back to
what you have so far.
I think a lot of the areas that are coming off as kind of black here would be green space, especially on this one. The black area would all be like grass area. you can see on the top of that, kind of what would end up being the south end of the quarters, the elbow, there's kind of a, right in there. That would be the outdoor space that serves the quarters. And so that would be very secluded. Once again, the public wouldn't be interacting, the public wouldn't have prying eyes. I mean, all it takes is a firefighter to be outside of a station grilling a hamburger, and people drive by and say, well, what are they doing? I mean, it's just, they're living. They live there too, you know? And so sometimes you have to screen those things just because people don't quite understand, they don't get it. So this site worked very well to sort of screen that sort of thing. And again, the actual design that we came up with, we only had a couple of days when we threw this thing together, but the concepts are very important. And one of the things, if you could point out, like that ramp, how do you put a 68-foot ramp on this site to get into subterranean space? Well, we found a way to make that work, and I think it's appropriate that that circulation and the apparatus circulation are totally separate from the public. The public does not have to walk through there. They don't have to be exposed to trucks coming and going, to ambulances coming and going, to people bringing equipment into the lower level, or the staff coming and going with the staff vehicles that would be in that basement.
I'm sure we'll ask more questions when we're done, but since you're on this, I'm concerned because it looks like you took away the drive-through bay.
We do not have a drive-through bay in this particular situation. We're basically driving in and backing in, driving up and backing into this one.
Right. So, yeah, you do not have a drive-through bay.
This one does not have a drive-through bay.
I just think, my personal opinion, is there not enough room up there to put it in?
Well, one of the things that happens with the drive-through bay is we'd have to rotate this building, and this just happened to be one approach that we took in order to park. Basically, we have 94 cars parked on the other half of the site in order to provide that parking for the training, the parking for the staff, and the parking for a shift change. We end up about 110, 114 cars, somewhere in that range, plus those 10 that are underneath. We end up using almost 100% of the site, and if we wanted to have a dispatch on site, we're not going to have room for that. And the only way to make the drive-through work would be to rotate this building and then probably come in from and I drew one of these concepts up, come in from the west and then drive through and respond towards the east. And then your doors would be east and west, which it's a viable option, but we push everything so far back in the site, the parking would go all the way to the south end. And that certainly could work, but then we'd lose the ability to have other functions on the site as well.
I understand that. I guess to me, that's old to sit there and back your trucks up into a bay. I just seem to me that's the old days when you do that. I'm not a fireman, you guys, but I know to me to get probably three firemen out there to back that, one to drive and two to show it back, that just seems like a waste of nowadays in this year and time. It seems a waste, but
you're absolutely spot on. Whenever we can, we do a drive-through. This particular site, it was a decision to try to save more of the site to do other things, but we could certainly make the site work that way.
If we go east and west too, we have some light issues with the people that live there.
with John and them, you mean? Yeah.
Because we'll be
Lights heading right into, they won't like that. I get that. I get
that's the
that.
first thing that comes to mind.
Okay, yeah, just.
But you're right. Your observation is spot on. We try to do, at least in that primary response bay, we always try to do a drive-through. And we could orient this to make that happen. It just would, I think we'd squander some of the site in terms of its flexibility, but if that's an important thing, we could make that work.
Okay.
I don't know how much time we have here. Basically, we're at a point where we've shown you what we've put together, and we'll just do a quick sort of summary here. We're ready. We're ready to get started on your project. This is the sort of projects we love, and we'd love to move forward. Let's look at the... no, there we go. Once again, we have assembled a team of experts that do this. All of us have done fire stations all day, every day in terms of our personal portfolios at EAPC. And we're a local team. We don't have to go outside of the Fargo area to get the expertise to do this work. We're right here. And like I said, we'll put our credentials up against anyone who's doing fire stations. And I think we're much more responsive to the North Dakota ethic, if you will, in terms of working all throughout North Dakota. We have 2 years of relationship building. We understand this project some of the nuances of it. And so we kind of got a head start in terms of what are the important points, what are the touch points, what are the things that have been talked about in terms of use of the site and understanding the site and those sort of things. I think, once again, we have, in North Dakota, we're unmatched in terms of our emergency response projects. And as I said before, we're the largest AE firm in North Dakota. We can impact this project and we can meet your schedules, and it is not a problem for us whatsoever. And I think one of the very, very important things is the fact that all these faces have worked together many times. This isn't our first rodeo of working together. I mean, anyone can put a team of experts together. This team has worked together, so we have that history. And I think that's very important to do what we need to do.
Another question that I hadn't heard you bring up yet was more and more women going into firefighting. In your design components, what considerations do you take into account when designing for both men and women?
Well, that's a very good point. We are doing a lot of, that's one of the basic decisions when we do station design, is what are we going to do with the quarters? Are we going to do individual rooms with individual bathrooms? Are we going to do individual rooms with Jack and Jill bathrooms? Are we going to do individual rooms with dormitory type bathrooms? And then how do we separate those back and forth? Obviously we're doing male and female if we're doing that sort of thing. But if we have the separate individual units, that takes care of itself. But it's a little more expensive. It's gone so far as, and I'll talk about Bruce Hoover a little bit. We did the Fargo Public Safety Building. He chose to make that building a barracks. That is one big open room with beds in it. And I'm like, Chief, are you sure that's what you want to do? And he goes, absolutely. I mean, he just put his fist on the table and says, and that's why that building is done that way. And so it's in our repertoire of projects, and if anyone's aware of that one, that's the reason it happened. We would not approach projects that way typically. But the other side of it is we want to listen to what you want, and some of those decisions certainly have cost implications on them as well. But we're, more often than not, we're doing individual sleep rooms with individual bathrooms and showers. So that's the end of our presentation. So any other follow-up questions? We'd love to hear them.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Alan. This was a great presentation. The expertise and the local knowledge you guys have definitely shines through. So that's a great thing to see. We do have about 6 minutes or so left for questions if anyone has anything else. I had a couple I can fire off real quick if everyone's good with that. As we're talking to some construction management companies, just in a general, people are reaching out, what's your timeline, that kind of stuff, and asking those questions. I'm hearing a lot of issues with supply chain and costs. With the Career Workforce Academy, did you guys run into anything like that? Or did you bid out early enough that you got past that hump? And then what's your plan with us if you get awarded this? How are you going to handle that?
We're right in the middle of that hump with CWA. Right in the middle of it. We're taking bids in a couple more days. We've been working with Comstock as the CM at risk, and we have been working with them from the start. It was a handshake from the start in terms of anticipating costs. And they've been updating and updating and updating. So there's a couple of ways we approach this. One is really protecting contingencies. Because even though we can spot check where prices are today, another month from now they may be even higher yet. And we're hearing there's another plateau that wood may be reaching. I don't know that we're going to use a lot of wood in this particular facility. This is going to be probably a non-combustible facility, so I don't know that wood affects us. But steel and concrete are going up. We need to work with those CMs right away and find out where the prices are, and we need to have active pricing day one and work through that to make sure we have real estimates, not just, well, the last facility we did cost, $300 a square foot. This one might be $325, $350. We need to make sure we're working hand in glove with those CMs, and that's what we do, and that's what we're doing with the CWA. Another thing we're experiencing is lead time on steel is excessive. Bar joists right now, bar joists could be as much as a year out. Wow. And most commercial buildings will use bar joists of some kind, typically. We have ways of not using bar joists. We can do junior beams and composite floor slabs and get away from that, because there's only a couple suppliers in the United States that do bar joists, and they're just way out there. We also found out when we were bidding, or when we were preparing for CWA, hollow column sections, hollow sections of any kind of structure are hugely expensive and out a long, long time. So we're going to use H sections, or I-beams, if you will. We're not going to use a lot of hollow sections, whether it be round or square. They're both way, way out there and way expensive right now. So we're aware of some of those things to look out for, and we've kind of, we're flattening that curve with CWA before we ever get to you guys. So that's the good news. The bad news is, I don't think prices are dropping.
Yeah, that's probably our realistic future, so, yeah.
Are you able to lock those prices in?
Well, with the CMs, we are. And I have to put a word of caution there. We can get a guaranteed maximum with this, depending on how your contract reads with your construction manager. Their problem is they're not getting locked in prices from their subs. So they're hedging on contingencies. So if they get a price for steel and it's $100 a ton, they're probably going to say, well, I better include $105, $110 a ton because this guy is only holding his price for probably a week. Yeah. And we used to always have people hold their prices for 30, 40 days, 60 days sometimes, depending on when you can award the contract. The CMs will do that, but the subs are just not.
Okay. The only other thing I saw that was kind of new, that the concept of a green roof. Are you guys doing any of that in state here? Have you seen anyone in North Dakota decide that they want to go with a green roof and recapture water and do a lot of energy efficient means?
We've done a few locally here. You don't see them all too often because there is a cost associated with them versus like our Chicago office, who gets tax credits for doing things like that to capture the water, handle the water. Again, they're in a larger urban area, so to answer your question, not as many as you would in a larger metropolitan area that is encouraging the use of green roof systems.
A couple years ago, we did a massive green roof for a hospital project, and it was called their Healing Garden. And so the hospital was a typical racetrack design, if you will, and that inner core, the floors all the way up to the second to the top floor were all infilled. So they had this plaza, if you will, that was protected. And we learned a lot in terms of what you can effectively do, because the big thing about the green roof is, yeah, it's expensive to do, and there's some tricks to doing it, but it also puts a lot of extra load on the structure. And of course, they had visions of trees and all these things happening in this space. Well, trees take a lot of root area and take a big chunk of earth, which weighs a lot. And so we did give them a bunch of trees, but we had to put the trees where there was columns on the floor below, or right adjacent to where there was beams at the beginning of the beams, so those shear loads were dealt with, and we were able to manage it. We just couldn't sprinkle trees wherever we wanted. So a lot of lessons learned.
The last question I had was, generally speaking, in terms of design fees, does your firm go off of a percentage of total project estimation, or how do you guys normally work your fees?
We anticipated you might ask that question.
Yep.
This is a typical fee chart that we've used for all our clients. We have 3 different levels of buildings, 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 buildings are hospitals and courthouses and monumental buildings. Most of your average projects that architects do are a Division 2 building. The Division 3 buildings are like storage buildings or cold storage or warehouses. So this would be a Type 2 building, and basically at about $7 million, this flattens out at 7%. Now that's where we start. I mean, that's our point of demarcation, that we start negotiating and talking about fees. But yes, we try to do we try to be fair with those fees and use those for all our clients, and that's our specific fee curve that we use.
Great, thank you. Let's see, it's 9. Anyone else have any questions they want to ask? No? Kendall, you got anything? No? Okay. Well, that's it. Can we get a copy of the PowerPoint too?
Absolutely.
I think there's some pictures that you guys wanted to look at a little closer. So yeah, it's exciting to see some of this start coming to fruition. But we know this is the beginning of the hard work and not necessarily the end. So yeah. Well, thank you very much, guys. We appreciate you coming in and talking with us.
Quick question for you guys. What's your time frame for making a decision?
So we have the rest of this week to, and we'll probably have a decision in the next 2 days. We have the final 3 firms, and we're going to rank order them 1 to 3, and then Jim and I are going to start talking with number 1 and about design fees and how we can, what that's going to look like. And the end, well, beginning would be May 17th. We're aiming to bring this before the full city commission for approval of the award of the bid, or award of the contract, sorry. So,
Okay,
yeah.
very well.
That seems
Thank you so much
realistic.
for the opportunity. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. We appreciate it.
Great presentation.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, we got 15 minutes for the next one. Yeah. Chris, can I keep this or?